The ocean is large and mysterious, and the fact that we know so little about it makes it especially creepy. Tonight we will be going over some horror stories involving just that. I hope you all enjoy them. If you do, please be sure to drop a like rating. It helps out the channel immensely. Subscribing if you are new is also very much appreciated, as I'm currently trying to reach 125,000 subscribers, and we're getting pretty close. Anyways, sit back, do whatever it is you do to relax, and as always, I hope you all have a great night. The Challenger Deep is the deepest point of our planet, 6.8 miles below the ground we walk on, and nearly completely desolate. A true marvel on the Earth, and a miraculous piece of geography. Up until recently, most scientists believed that the Challenger Deep was the deepest point of our Earth. Keyword, recently. I work for the NOAA, or National Oceanic and Atmospheric Administration, as a submersible pilot. I've been on countless dives and seen countless things. It's an amazing job, one that I can't imagine ever not taking. If there is one place to appreciate nature and life as we know it, it's the ocean. Yet, the vastness of the ocean is a horrifying concept. We are slow in the water, and in the parts of the ocean where you can't see anything below you, it is hard to shake the thought of some massive marine predator snatching you up in its jaws. Despite this, our research knows no bounds, and around a month ago, my team made a massive discovery. A shift in the tectonic plates showed us that, in the cracks of the Challenger Deep, there was something below it, an entirely unexplored and unknown region of our world. The team was ecstatic, and negotiations for a press release were immediately brought to our supervisor. Unfortunately, he decided not to go ahead with the news just yet. According to him, after talks with the heads of the NOAA, they wanted us to go on an expedition to see what was there, and then showcase our findings to the world. I wasn't pleased with this, but I knew that it would make a better headline in the news if we actually found stuff down there. As one of the most experienced submersible pilots, I was chosen to head the mission. It would be a solo mission, one that, in my supervisor's words, would change the way we saw the ocean forever. So, after a ton of preparations and warnings and papers, my submersible was hovering over the water, my legs pointed directly at the opening to this new, deeper subsection of Earth's crust. My submersible, named Apollo by me, was reinforced heavily, with intense fortifications and the best titanium money could buy. She was a beautiful thing, one that I could never see myself as worthy of piloting. Yet, with one swift motion, I was dropped into sea. I won't bore you with the details of the descent, as nothing out of the ordinary occurred. I saw numerous creatures, critters, and otherwise, but nothing there was something I hadn't seen before. Aside from a sperm whale swimming above me that made me nearly crap myself. After roughly 3 hours, I had finally hit the Challenger Deep. Admittedly, I was a little scared. Despite my numerous adventures into the bowels of deep blue, I had never actually been here at the bottom. It was empty. Not a speck of life besides maybe some bacteria. If loneliness could have a textbook definition, it would be this: dark, cold, and desolate. The fact anything could live down here whatsoever was unbelievable. Move forward. My intercom sprung to life, jolting me out of my complete awe. I had completely forgotten why I was here, trapped in the sheer complexity of the nothingness of this place. I complied, moving Apollo upwards a bit, and that's when I saw it, a massive gash in the seafloor, stretching for what could have been miles. It was wide, too, almost the entire width of a school bus. This wasn't what was shown in our scannings, with the gap being smaller and less wide. Whatever we had seen before, it had expanded. I reported this to my supervisor, who shared the same mild perturbance that I did. Maybe another shift occurred here recently. Maybe. His lackluster answer to my report did not inspire confidence. But I had to keep going. "I am about to enter the opening," I said with a very obvious amount of uncertainty in my voice. "Go ahead. Good luck, man," my supervisor responded. And with that, I entered the new, deepest point of our Earth. The opening was normal in nature, with nothing but rock and earth surrounding my descent for the first 20 meters or so. However, after this, it all became dark again. There was no more wall, no more gash. I checked my sonar, and my mouth dropped to the floor in sheer amazement. I was inside a gigantic cave, nearly 1 mile on diameter. I was at a loss of words, my thoughts taking over where my mouth couldn't. My mind began to race, with intense ideas and fears and terrors unveiling themselves. What could be down here? Is it dangerous? Will I die? Etc. I reported my findings to my supervisor, who was, just like me, completely starstruck. "Are you sure that's what you see?" my supervisor sputtered out. "Yes." The submarine had been equipped with the latest technology, and one of those was a radar, just in case anything like a whale or other large creature happened to be approaching me. This radar never failed, but it hadn't sprung to life in hours due to the lack of anything big at this depth. Yet it was suddenly firing off. I moved to look at it, and to my both amazement and terror, 5 large blips were moving towards me. I tried to keep myself together, desperately breathing in and out in a pathetic attempt to keep myself from hyperventilating, but it wasn't working. Nothing of this size should be down at this depth. My mind began to picture beasts, monsters, and ravenous creatures coming to rip me apart. In my nervous state, I hadn't realized my supervisor had been trying to talk to me. After nearly tripping over myself, I clumsily reopened the line. "Why have you stopped? What is it?" my supervisor sternly, yet curiously asked. "There's 5 something moving towards me, sir. I have no idea what they are," I stammered out, my voice shaky and completely broken by the fear that gripped my throat. "Wait, are you serious? How big are they?" my supervisor asked. I checked the blips. They were 5 seconds from my position. They weren't massive, but they were still too big for this environment. A solid 7 to 9 feet in length. Roughly 8 feet. Just then, I felt a strong, hard, and intense hit come from the outside. Not like something was trying to break in, but rather like something had bumped into Apollo. I checked the 3D cameras, checking the side at which I felt the collision. I caught a glimpse of a tail, floating off into the darkness. It looked rigid and crustacean-like, shaped almost like an ace of spades. As I tried to make sense of it, another bump came from above. Whatever these things were, they were strong. Not strong enough to break through titanium, but strong enough to move the vessel a solid foot. I checked the cameras again, this time seeing a pair of legs. They looked like they came from some sort of insect, akin to the legs of a spider, but thicker and with barbs. Once again it floated into the darkness. Once again a hit came, this time targeting the pilot's chamber, scaring the piss out of me. I didn't need to check the cameras. The thing hit my window, and it didn't move from my view. I was completely stuck, entranced by what could only be described as a miracle of nature. A living fossil, floating in front of me, locking its round, pure black eyes with me, practically hypnotizing me to admire its sheer beauty, was a massive, yellowish tan, prehistoric creature. A Eurypterid, commonly known by paleontologists and biologists as a sea scorpion. I was dumbfounded. Sea scorpions had gone extinct over 250 million years ago, when the Great Dying happened, otherwise known as the Permian extinction event. Eurypterids were completely wiped out by this, so I was at a loss of words. No words could ever describe what I was feeling. I think it was admiring me back. It surely hadn't seen humans before. It tilted its insecty head at me, wondering what I was. Suddenly more of them came to the window, dumbfounded at what they were seeing. Baby sea scorpions sat atop what I assumed was their mothers, analyzing and internalizing what I was. I began taking photographs of the sea scorpions and sent them to my supervisor. He beamed back to me on the intercom as the cheers of my colleagues rang out in the background. "This is an amazing find. Do you see anything else?" "Not right now, but I'll update you if I do." As I resigned from the intercom once again, the sea scorpions continued to look at me. They almost seemed to gawk at me, as I did the same to them. Suddenly they all cleared, and a much larger, older-looking one got up to the glass. My submersible had arms, grabbers used to move away debris and rocks/minerals. It moved its shelled body to the arms, rubbing up against it, before lowering its head to show me a large parasite that had binded to it. I was confused as to what it was incentivizing, until finally I understood that it wanted me to remove the thing. The arms were not surgical, but fortunately, the parasite was big, meaning the arms could hopefully remove it. I knew it was risky, and if I accidentally killed it, I could be in massive trouble. However, somewhere deep within me, I knew it was desperate. So, as carefully as I could, I maneuvered the arms to reach the critter. It was very much like piloting a claw machine, with every movement a stressor on my psyche. Finally, I had a good grip on the parasite, with the other arm holding the elder sea scorpion's head steady, and with one good tug, the little thing came right off. The sea scorpion jolted, shaking its head in what I could only assume was pain. Yet once the pain subsided, it looked happy, spinning in place with an upbeat pattern. It got back up to the window, and with a happy, almost animal-like bunt against Apollo, it descended back into the depths, with the rest of its family unit following it. With that experience over, I descended further, my mind straight and my heart beating with just a little more pride. I reported the encounter with my staff who, when shown photos, absolutely thrilled. Fortunately, my supervisor was happy with me and green-lighted the further descent. The sonar continued to prove my suspicion, with the cave proving to be a worthwhile endeavor for the entire NOAA. Eventually I reached the middle of the cave, when the radar came back to life. Something was approaching the ship again, something absolutely gigantic. It must have been at least 60 feet in length. Now, I was someone who generally despised people who promoted the idea of Megalodon living in the trench. However, seeing the radar blip with a massive white dot, you can't blame me for being scared of whatever was approaching. I had already seen a literal living fossil, and I wasn't against the idea of a massive monster being down here anymore. However, my fears were calmed as I realized how slow it was moving. Hell, it might as well have been sitting still. I entered the intercom again to my supervisor, who told me to move towards it. Despite my fears, curiosity got the best of me, and I moved towards the blip. In the darkness, I couldn't see a damn thing, so I began to brace myself for a collision just in case. But I never reached it, not before it let out a deep, loud, and inundating shockwave of noise. It sounded like a whale's call, but significantly louder and with more bass. My head rung from the sound, my heart nearly exploding out of sheer terror and anxiety. Suddenly the lights came face to face with the source of the noise. Thinking back on it now, humans really are tiny in comparison to some things. We are the apex predator, but we definitely aren't the top dogs in some areas. Size is definitely one of them. In front of Apollo was a gigantic fish, bony and large. Its head looked like it was made exclusively from bone, armored and rigid. The rest of its figure slowly came into view, its large body unveiling itself to the light. Another living fossil, a large, healthy, and majestic fish. The behemoth paid me no mind, its gargantuan body regarding me with no more than what felt like a simple look. Of course, I began taking photos, and sent them to my supervisor. The intercom shot to life again, and the ovation of my peers could be heard once more. Eventually its large, scaly torso moved into the darkness, never to be seen again. I was given the green light to go further down, but I realized after 3 seconds of descent that I finally reached the bottom. It was different than the Challenger Deep. It was gray in color, with little to no sand on its surface. Jagged scars permeated from its surface, scattered across a variety of areas. What was interesting was that the bottom felt soft, almost like it was a cushion rather than rock. I began talking to my supervisor, discussing what the next move was. He wanted to explore the place further, to see if any other living fossils existed down here. I couldn't blame him. Everything we knew about the ocean and its inhabitants had been flipped on its head. It was amazing. As I began to move forward, something odd happened. The ground beneath me began to vibrate a bit. At first I attributed it to shifting plates, but then out of nowhere, the ground moved completely, nearly knocking over Apollo. Suddenly the radar blipped a dot out, but it wasn't a dot at all. The white blip I would have usually seen encompassed almost the entire radar circle, as if the entire area around me was a living organism. I then did a sonar scan, and saw what my mind had been trying to suppress ever since the radar did what it did. What could only be described as a leviathan was moving, and this movement was occurring right beneath me. What I had landed on wasn't ground. It was a living thing, and I had just woke it up. In my panic, I tried to turn on the intercom, but it wouldn't even go. The station I had been using to communicate with my team had been taken completely off the system, so I did the only thing left. Get the hell out. I began piloting the submersible out of Dodge, moving it as fast as it could go. Suddenly Apollo stopped completely. Her engine was on, but she wouldn't budge. I checked the sonar, and I wasn't stuck on anything. It simply wouldn't budge. The intercom then came on, and my supervisor's voice was replaced by a loud, yellowing and deep voice. "No, stay." I was completely frozen, my mind a jumble of fear, shock, and confusion. Was it talking to me? I slowly shot the intercom back on. "Who are you?" I stammered out, my voice a complete mess of sounds and obvious nervousness. The creature bellowed back, its voice calm yet commanding. "I am not a who. Even if I were, it does not matter." My mind began jumbling thoughts, many associated with how on earth this thing was speaking English. Or, for that matter, speaking at all. Why are you here? How did you find this place? I responded truthfully. I am a marine explorer. A shift in Earth's sea crust opened up a hole beyond what we thought was the deepest point of Earth. I was tasked with going in. I couldn't see it, and thank God I couldn't. It probably would have given me a heart attack, but I could tell it was thinking of what to say. Are you here to harm or to heal? I was scared to answer, but I had helped that sea scorpion earlier. I thought that, if what I believed was my life being on the line, telling this deep sea monster I had helped it would be useful. Earlier I encountered some Eurypterids. I helped this elder one with a parasite. It intook my words and responded back, "Thank you." In the calming nature of its voice, I eased slightly, my mind gaining some clarity to ask it further questions. What is this place?" I asked. The creature didn't respond for a while, but after what felt like eons, it finally spoke up. Many, many years ago, long before your species ever walked this planet, species of different eras managed to survive their respective calamities. The Eurypterids, as you call them, were not suited for their new world, so I called upon them to descend to this cavern, instilling them with an increased strength and tolerance for the conditions here. As time passed, more water-dwelling creatures came, and now they reside here. I am the guardian of this place, my purpose solely to defend and protect the nature here. I was at a loss of words. This thing, whatever it was inherently some sort of underwater deity. I couldn't even begin to wrap my head around the concept before it spoke through the intercom again. "You shouldn't be here." I snapped out of my thoughts, and upon hearing this, I became more confused than ever. I guess it could understand what I was thinking, because it fired up the intercom again. "You and your congregation are benevolent, but the rest of your kind is not. They pillage, loot, and destroy the ecosystem above. Many recent underwater creatures have come here, and they speak of you and your species' mayhem. I will seal this hole again, and you are not to ever return here. Do not tell any of your kind of my existence, and leave with the knowledge you have now, but no more." I understood. It was right, unfortunately. "I see," I muttered. The beast did not speak through the intercom this time, only making an incomprehensibly loud bellow that, if anywhere else, could have most likely took down a whole city through decibels alone. Before I began to comply and go ahead and ascend, one more question entered my mind. "How did you end up here?" The intercom stayed silent for the longest time, before it echoed to life for the last time of my journey. "Some secrets are best left secrets." A part of me was slightly annoyed at this, but I understood, and so I began my ascent. After resurfacing, my colleagues bombarded me with questions, demanding to know why I had basically gone off the grid. My supervisor was majorly pissed, but at the end of the day, none of it mattered. The next day, in the dead of night, I went back to my post on the station to see if the hole had closed, and sure enough, it did. I don't think I'll ever forget my experiences in the deep, and to be frank, who could? It was a jarring experience, and one that I think I'll never be able to truly comprehend. The media couldn't get it either, as the images of modern-day prehistoric monsters have swept through the internet like wildfire, with every site on the web talking about how interesting this truly is. If another crack forms, or Earth cuts open again and we find another one of these, however, I will not go back, for I still don't know what it was, and I don't want to find out. My wife Anna passed close to my son's 7th birthday. She was off visiting her family in Mexico and suddenly fell ill. About 72 hours from her showing the initial symptoms, we were told she'd passed away. I can't properly describe how devastating it was. I'm not going to go into that. Not here. I've lived in Guatemala my whole life. Well, I've been both north and south of the border a couple of times. There had always been something pulling me back to my home country. Anna and I had lived in Antigua ever since Gaspar was born, but we'd always talked about moving to the East Coast. She was born there, and it always seemed like a nice place to raise kids. Now, we only had time to have one child, but I was going to give him the best life I could afford. I mean, it's not like we didn't try to have more. Things just didn't work out that way. I could still see her whenever I saw my boy. He had her eyes and her brown hair. I couldn't look at him without remembering the promises we'd made. So a couple of months after Anna passed, I packed our things and moved. No more waiting. If you continue northeast past Puerto Barrios, there is a small coastal town. You know you're getting there when the road turns to dirt and the jacaranda trees grow taller. It's like nature knows people gotta stay longer in the sun. So the branches reach a little further and the shade grows a little thicker. I'd grown up working with boats, so it was easy enough to get a job. A couple of folks knew Anna's family, so I had a foot in the door before they even met me. I got a cheap house made of beautiful smooth white stone, and one wall which was just raw exposed brick. It really reflected the town, stunningly beautiful, from the right angle. We moved in on short notice. The house had been empty since the previous owner passed, and the surviving family decided to sell it off. It was nice enough, but you could tell there was more history to it than you might be comfortable with. Little notches on the floor, subtle stains on the walls, a kitchen where the smell of fried fish wouldn't go away. It wasn't unpleasant, just different. Anna's death had been hard on everyone. I had to keep up appearances and focus on Gaspar. But now that I was settling into a new routine, things were changing fast. Gaspar was starting school, and getting to meet all new friends. I guess, in a way. I was supposed to do that too. It's silly worrying about whether your work colleagues are gonna like you or not, but it can make or break your social life. And at my age, what little social life you have is precious. As I got used to the new town, I spent a lot of time by the sea. Boats would come and go at all hours of the day. There was this one station by the pier open 24 hours a day where everyone was registered, meaning there was always some disinterested teenager sitting in the booth, waiting to sign a sheet of paper. I think the smell was the hardest to get used to. Salt and fish and foam. Sick, sweet, and salt, all hitting you at different angles like the southpaw of a skillful boxer. On my first day of work, I was early enough to watch the first fisherman pull into the pier. A tired man in his early 50s pulled a cart with 4 coolers. Waving at the tired kid in the booth, he sat down on the bench next to me. Maybe he was overworked, or a little drunk, but I could tell he wasn't all right. He looked over at me with deep bags under his eyes. "You're new," he stated matter-of-factly. "I am," I said. "I fix boats." "Good," he nodded. Only reason mine floats is because it's too crap for the ocean to eat. She's not a picky eater, I smiled. What? I said she's not a picky eater, I repeated. You know, the ocean. Don't talk like you know her, Kwate, he said, giving me a cold look. You don't know her like I do. Don't pretend you do. I'm just making conversation. And I'm here to make a good one, he said, pointing a finger at me. Don't think you can figure this place out in a couple days. There's history in this land. There's bones in that sea. You understand? I get you, I said. I respect that. The man got up and dragged his cart along, smacking the side of the wall of a nearby house. Someone was already up to meet him, but they didn't seem too happy about it. I watched two young women help carry the coolers inside, talking to him with tired smiles, and he just waved them off. Don't mind Simon, someone said. He's crazy. I turned around and recognized my employer, Lino. He'd stood there for a while just to see what I was up to. I got up in a flash, reaching out to shake his hand. He accepted it with a smile. He's 30 years older than he looks, Lino continued. Been a grumpy old man since he was a kid, they say. I don't mind grumpy, I smiled. That's what towns are made of, right? Yeah, Lino grinned. So let's hope we get to be grumpy old men too. Lino's workshop felt like someone's living room. Pictures on the walls, music playing on the speakers, equal smells of motor oil, and Ron Zacapa. Lino was an absolute treasure of a person. If Don't Worry, Be Happy had a face, it'd be him. He had a green shirt that was older than my kid, and this sort of ill-kept handlebar mustache that he kept stroking when he tried to keep a serious face. I couldn't help but think he looked like a tanner Freddie Mercury, minus the teeth. We worked on the engine of a private boat that day. Leisure type stuff. Not anything big and functional. Someone came in saying the engine kept stalling. Lino figured they'd been getting too close to shore and kept getting trash stuck in the propeller, but I convinced him to do a thorough check. We found some engine tearing that might lead to a complete breakdown in a couple more runs, so we fixed it. It was quick and cheap, and Lino charged next to nothing for it despite it costing us half a day to work through. You make people who can afford a boat like this happy, they don't ever go somewhere else, he said. It's not just making friends, it's good business. By the end of our first day, we stopped outside the workshop to have a smoke. I hadn't smoked since I met Anna, but I didn't see the point to stick to that anymore. One puff and I got the coughs. Lino picked up on it, but decided not to ask. Instead, he pointed at a shed just off the pier. You see that? He said. Take a look. Tell me what you see. A shed, I said. Cheap roofing. No. See what's on the roof? I looked a little closer. 2 seagulls? That's right, Lino said. 2 seagulls. Now, have you noticed something strange about them? Other than not pooping on me? No. Yeah, but that's just the thing. There are gulls everywhere. Listen. I took another puff of smoke, letting it coat my lungs and simmer into my nerves. I turned my head up and closed my eyes. All I could hear was the pulse of the ocean, and the clatter of everyday life coming from the buildings around us. I couldn't hear the gulls. They're silent around here, Lino said. You won't hear them screaming or attacking. They don't do that. BS. No, I'm serious, he smiled. They say so many people died at sea that even the gulls stopped laughing about it. They say that, huh? Well, Simon does. Lino nodded. But he loves those things, so he should know. You can see him feeding them before he goes out every night. I didn't question it. Grumpy people tend to prefer the company of animals. There was a place right next door to the workshop where I could get some cheap tapato, so I bought some for me and Gaspar. I took the long road back home, getting acquainted with the streets and those who lived there. A couple of folks gave me crooked looks and folded arms, but others waved and cheered as I passed. It would take some time, but I could see them warming up to me. By the time I got to the street, I noticed something. There were seagulls all over the roof, looking down on me. About 30 of them all in all. It was true what Lino said. They'd been unusually quiet. I'd never seen a seagull that hadn't screeched and whooped, but these were different somehow. As I approached, I could see them gathering at the edge of the roof, looking down on me. Gaspar was already home, waiting by the door. Before I got a chance to greet him, one of the gulls opened its mouth and screamed. One by one they joined in. It wasn't the usual cackling of seagulls. It was more of a laugh, a stunted, stuttered laugh. Gaspar and I had dinner in the living room, watching cartoons on the TV. I asked him about school, but he was too shy to talk about it. He wasn't really a fan of the soup I'd bought, but I promised he'd get used to it. There were so many other things to try too. If we ask nicely, I bet we can go out on a boat, I said. I think you'd like it. It's nice out there. I don't like the ocean, he said. It's too big, scary. That's what makes it great. You can swim for hours and there's always something new to see. I prefer YouTube. He finished up and hunkered down in his room. I sat down in the kitchen, popped open a gallo, and took the load off my feet. But even then, I noticed a gull on the fence outside, staring right into my kitchen window. And the moment our eyes met, it laughed, and not in the way that gulls usually do. The following morning after I sent Gaspar to school, I met Simon by the pier again. He had 5 coolers that morning. A successful trip, it seemed. He sat down on the same bench, sighed, and gave me a tired side-eye. He didn't have much to say, so I decided to take the lead on this one. They say you know the gulls, I said. Is that true? You better believe it, he nodded. They're my children. So what does it mean when they laugh at you? He turned to me, his expression growing concerned. They laugh at you? Yeah, a bunch of them did yesterday. Means you got misery coming, Cuate. They got you with the Recess del Mar. They sensed something. The laugh of the sea. Simon even had a name for it. They sense that darkness in you, Cuate. You can hide it from the rest, but you're not fooling my gulls. They're gonna laugh at you. Why'd they do that? Maybe they want you to chin up. Maybe you're bringing my gulls down. Maybe they don't think you belong. Could be a lot of things. He got up with a grunt and grabbed his cart. Without looking back, he ended the conversation. You think you belong here? He chuckled. You think this is meant for you? I had no answer, and in the distance, a gull laughed. I spent a couple of days working with Lino to get into the rhythm of things. Just like he'd said, the rich client came back with another boat. This one was more of a touch-up job rather than a pure fix. We just looked it over, cleaned it a bit, and called it a day. Took us just a couple of hours, and paid more than the last job 2 times over. We took some time working with the local fishermen. Quick fixes, mostly. Lino introduced me to half the town. I got told more names than I could count. One guy, son of another guy, cousin to a third guy. There was the dumb guy with the hot sister, the even dumber guy who married her. This was a town of stories and lives, and I was jumping straight into it with both feet at once. I stepped out of that workshop feeling lighter than I'd been in weeks. There was that glimpse of something new, that maybe, if I worked hard, I could make a life for myself. Then I peered up at the rooftops, and there the gulls sat, laughing. I felt my smile fade. They could see past it all. They could see and laugh at my pain. It was there, hidden under a vain attempt at fitting in. "Don't let them get to you, compa," Lino said. "It's just birds." But it wasn't that easy. I'd hear them every morning as I went to work. I'd see them on the rooftops, looking down on me. They never laughed at anyone else. Not Simon, not Lino, not the dumb guy with the hot sister. No one. Just me. The risa del mar. The laugh of the sea. Maybe Misery didn't love company. Maybe she just lives by the coast. Sometimes the gulls would get louder. Sometimes the gulls would get louder. Whenever I stubbed a toe or stalled an engine, they'd laugh even harder. I would be so prepared to hear them that I'd get distracted, which would just cause more misfortune. I once tried bribing them, putting out a bowl of cooked, unsalted rice. They wouldn't touch it. They just circled it, picked at it, and laughed. I'd never seen a bird reject a free meal. One night as I went to bed, I thought about the people that used to live in that house. They'd slept in that room too, coloring it with their little dreams and hopes. I could almost see myself in 30 years, just like they did, laying in that same room, dreaming the same dreams. But in those moments, the space next to me felt colder than ever. I missed Anna with every breath of every day, but in those cold hours of the night, it just hurt a little more. And in those moments of weakness, where a tear might chase its way down my eyes, I'd hear the gulls outside laughing. "Please stop," I'd whisper into my pillow. "Please stop laughing." That just made them laugh harder, louder. "I've done you nothing. Please." But they didn't stop. They'd laugh all night, hoping to wound me for just a little longer. Lino had a slightly different view of things. He and the other locals stuck to this one saying that would slip out every now and then. "El que mucho se asante pronto deja de hacer falta," or "He who is often absent stops being missed." You have to put yourself out there if you want to be part of things. So instead of wallowing in self-pity, I was gonna have to put myself on the line. Now, Lino never once asked me about Anna and our lives together. He'd heard a little about it, and he knew better than to ask. So instead, he just did his best to bring me along. Fishing trips with some of his cousins, late nights at the bars watching sports and drinking rum. Gaspar would stay at a friend's house. He was quicker to pick up friends than me, I figured. Lino would introduce me to single women my age, but back off when he realized I wasn't ready. But with every step forward, there'd be that long walk home at night, and every single time, there'd be a gull, laughing its heart out, reminding me that at the end of it all, that room would be as dark as ever, as cold as ever, dead. There was one morning when I hadn't slept that well. As I ran into Simon, the gulls were at full force, circling me, laughing from up high. I snapped at Simon as he came by, pulling his carts. Just 3 coolers that morning. "What do I gotta do?" I asked. "How long are they gonna laugh at me?" "You getting mad at the birds, Guate?" Simon had the same laugh as the gulls. Maybe they got it from him. "I'm serious. I said. This is ridiculous. You blame the mirror for making you ugly, too? Shut up. He stopped for a moment and looked at me, shaking his head. You know the last one the gulls laughed at? He asked. Same woman that lived in that house of yours, not long before she died. You trying to scare me? Ask anyone, he continued. Right before she died, they were all over her. And her husband? Who knows? He never left the house. You'd forget he even lived there. So what are you trying to say? That I'm about to die? Simon rolled his eyes and grabbed his cart. I'm telling you to stop being weak, he snapped back. Have a drink, cut your hair, kiss a woman. He flicked a couple of coins at me as he wandered off, still laughing, just like the gulls. That day turned out awful, just awful. I broke an expensive spare part and cut my palm on a sharp knife. When Lino came over to help, I turned him away. I didn't even think about it. Even though my ears couldn't hear them, my heart echoed with the shrieking laughter of the gulls. The Risa del Mar. When I sat down to clear my head, Lino joined me, giving me some time to calm down. You know the people who lived in that house before me? I asked. Lady de Leon? He asked. Yeah, I remember her. Simon says the gulls laughed at her before she died. Yeah, I remember, he said. Can't say it was a big surprise. She was ancient, but we miss her. What about her husband? Lino raised an eyebrow at that. Then he nodded, as if a light had come on in the back of his mind. Right, he said. I forget about him sometimes. He never left the house, but you could see his stupid red hat in the windows. Did he die too? I suppose he did. Lino nodded. I can't remember. Coming home that evening, I anticipated the gulls sitting in a row along the roof laughing at me. They knew I'd had a bad day, and they weren't about to let me forget it. But they weren't there. The house was empty, not a single gull, not a hint of a laugh. It was nice in a way. It showed me a home the way it was meant to be seen. I wouldn't dread going to sleep that night, but I still felt like something was off. For all the unease those birds brought me, there was something stranger about them suddenly going away. Had I done something wrong? Gaspar? I called out. I'm making shrimp. You want coconut rice or the usual? There was no response. I walked out into the hallway looking around. He wasn't in the living room, not in the backyard either. By the time I dug through his room, I could feel my pulse rising. He wasn't hiding. He wasn't coming out. I called out and there was no response. Gaspar? I kept calling, but he wasn't out back or out front. He wasn't coming down the road. I expected his voice, but got only echoes of mine. He should have been home by now, and the seagulls were gone. I called his school, but he wasn't there. I asked for the name of his friend, so I could see if he stayed with them for dinner, but I got an unusual response. What friend? Turns out, Gaspar had been having trouble in school. He had trouble relating to the other kids, and they had trouble fitting him into groups. He wouldn't get into fights, but he would blend into the background. They'd forget he was even there. I called every kid in his class, asking if they'd seen my boy. Most of them didn't know his name. No one had seen anything. He just put on his backpack and wandered off, like every other day. Or so they thought. They couldn't remember for sure. Finally, I turned to Lino. I asked him to reach out to everyone he knew. My boy is missing, I stuttered. You must help me. I must find him. You have a kid? He asked. Of course, he's Gaspar, my boy. You never talk about him, Lino said. I'm sorry, I didn't realize. I have a son, I emphasized. I'll make some calls. What does he look like? I looked at one of the pictures on the wall. Gaspar, Anna, and me. It was blurry, sun-bleached. Brown hair, I said. He has brown hair. What else? I didn't have an answer. For some reason, I couldn't think of anything. Not his eyes, not his smile. I could barely even imagine his voice. I hung up on Lino and looked out the window. A single gull sat on the fence outside, its head cocked to the side. They weren't laughing anymore. If anything, it seemed concerned. I drove around town asking anyone and everyone if they'd seen him. A boy walking around with a backpack, looking lost or scared. No one had seen him, heard him, nothing. Finally, I drove by this run-down little one-story house, its walls patched with driftwood planks and sheet metal. It was impossible not to recognize the man swaying back and forth in a hammock on the porch. Simon, listening to his radio. I stopped. I wanted to ask him if he'd seen my boy, but I knew the answer already. Instead, I got out of my car and called out to him. "Did you ask them to do this?" I yelled. "Is this you?" "Is this what?" He yelled back. "What do you want?" "You don't like me, so now the gulls don't like me, and now my boy is gone." Simon rolled out of his hammock and turned off the radio. He gave me a curious look, not angry, concerned, like the gulls. "He didn't come home. I can't find him," I continued. "I don't know what to do. I don't know what to do, Simon." "They laugh at pain, Kwate," he said. "Pain is for those who are still there. Those who are gone don't suffer anymore." "Stop it with the riddles," I snapped. "I'll make you swallow your teeth. Just tell me what they did to my boy." Simone picked something up from the side of his hammock and walked over to me. Still not angry, he looked up at the sky. "I don't think they were laughing, Kwate," he said. "I think they were trying to warn you." "That's not what you said. You said they laugh at my pain." "Two things can be true, you know. They're birds. They're not complicated. But you know what I think?" He took a swig from a bottle and pointed eastward. A long line of gulls could be seen in the distance, circling something. "Maybe they're waiting for you," he said. "Pay attention. Listen." I got back in my car, trying to see the gulls. It was a weird angle, but I could hang my head out the window if necessary. Simone knocked on my window. "No," he said. "They're going out to sea." He opened the car door and held out a hand. "We'll take my boat." Simone's boat was in desperate need of a touch-up. He'd been stubborn about getting it fixed, but I could hear the engine struggling the moment it puttered away from the pier. We were heading east, where the gulls still circled. I had a moment of doubt. I'd been projecting my insecurities on these birds for weeks at this point. What if I was still doing it? But no, that wasn't it. Despite it all, I could tell Simone had his heart in the right place. When it hits the fan, you don't want the person who tells you everything is gonna be okay. You want the one who spits on the problem and says, "Let's get this done." The sun was setting, slowly but surely. A stiff breeze rattled the buttons on my pale orange shirt. I couldn't smell the ocean anymore. I'd gotten used to it. Something hit the boat. Maybe a rock, or a sudden push from a wave. Simone tried to keep us straight, but it was too late. I fell overboard, plunging into the dark. For those who haven't swum in the open sea, there's nothing quite like it. An eternal mix of emerald blue in every direction, turning into a shimmering orange as the sun sets. In the distance, you might see a few spots swimming about, only to realize they're fish the size of your hand. But down there, it all looks small, even you. And don't look down. At the best of times, you see the immense darkness sucking you down, and in the worst of cases, you see something coming up. I forced my head above the surface. The sun had already set. A mild fog was settling over the ocean surface. I couldn't see anything. Left, right, it was all just water. Waves pushing me in every direction, grabbing a hold of me. I could feel a chill reaching up to spill the warmth in my chest. My toes were already tingling. As I kicked, one of my shoes came off, tumbling downward like a slow leaf in the wind, rocked by invisible currents. I called out to Simone, but I could barely hear my voice over the waves. There was no way he'd hear me over the engine. Then again, I couldn't even hear him anymore. He must have kept going, or sunk. But I could hear something else. Seagulls. I listened and swam until my arms ached. My eyes burned from the salt. I could feel my legs taking longer and longer to kick as my head dipped further under the surface. I had trouble getting my mouth up. I swallowed a mouthful of salt water as my rhythm broke, and in another 2 kicks, I was submerged. I counted to 30, kicking as hard as I could. Then, out of nowhere, my toes touched sand. I pulled my way onto a long deserted beach. Not a bird among the trees, no insects in the bushes. A steady wind pulled on the leaves of the blue sunflowers resting under the sweet gum trees, making them rattle like a dry applause. Then I saw people, just a couple of them standing further in by the tree line. Dark, tired eyes, lips so chapped they looked like leather, a man with a broken shirt hanging off his left shoulder, a middle-aged woman in a folk dress. As I approached, they stepped back. "I need help," I wheezed. "I need to find my boy." They didn't say a word. I took a couple steps forward and they faded into the dark, disappearing into the shade of the trees. They left no footsteps in the sand. There were so many more. The further I went and the closer I looked, I saw them. Quiet people, looking on from afar. If I got too close, they'd step away. If I stopped to look, they did the same. Dark, tired eyes, asking me silent questions. Some of them looked old, not in age, but in clothes. 100 years, 200 years, maybe 1,000. One of them was an old man with an unusual red bucket hat. I looked a little closer but couldn't figure out what he reminded me of. Perhaps I forgot. I'd been so preoccupied with my own troubles and woes that I hadn't considered Gaspar. I hadn't stopped to make sure he was okay. Much like the rest of town, and even his school, I'd forgotten about him. Maybe that's what the gulls were laughing at. Not me messing up another social faux pas with Lino and the boys, but me forgetting to check in on my boy. "I'm sorry, Anna," I muttered as I dragged my feet through the cooling sand. One shoe missing. I was just looking at me. It was just about me. I forgot. There was a fire up ahead, a campfire on the beach. Stepping closer, I could see 2 people sitting on a log, staring into the flames. A tall man and a boy. I recognized neither. I was having trouble focusing on the man. One moment he was tall and slim, the other he was short and fat. He was young, he was old. He was handsome, he was ugly. He would shift and turn as if to change whenever I thought I had an idea of what he looked like he refused to be what I expected. I took a deep breath and stepped forward. The words didn't come from him. Instead, they came from the tree line. A dozen dialects all at once. A single chorus of voices. I cannot care for you, they said. I'm looking for someone, I said. I don't need you to care. Who are you looking for? A cacophony, struggling voices, having been dormant for years. I'd hear them fight to remember the words and to roll their stiff tongues. My boy, I said. I'm looking for my boy. Is this him? They asked. I looked at the boy by the fire. I couldn't say. I couldn't place him in my mind. I could only remember what I'd said about him, or what others had said. I could remember Anna telling me how she loved his curly brown hair, but I couldn't picture it. I care for him, they said. I do not forget. The voices crackled, breaking into monotones. They left me in the woods, a man said. I slept in the mountains. No one came to find me, said another. I fell over. They kept going. There were hammerheads in the water. They never asked my name. People abandoned, forgotten, sacrificed, left to die by the side of the road or stuck in a mountain crevice. If he is here, you must find him, the choir said. Will you look? I will look, I agreed. I'll look anywhere. You may have to stay for long, they said, until perhaps you are forgotten too. I don't care. Good. In the blink of an eye, I was along a country road. My leg was broken. I was screaming for help, but no one came. The flies wouldn't stop gathering on my face, picking at dry blood, pain, desperation. They should have been there hours ago, but they forgot. Bleeding through the night, passing from warmth to cold to warmth again, serenaded to the other side by whispering insects. Then, watching a boat disappear on the horizon, my legs growing weak, the waves growing higher. They must have noticed I was gone. Maybe they did. Maybe they didn't care. Movement in the dark creeping closer. Something brushing up against my leg. Something with rough skin. A single eye reflecting the moonlight as a hammerhead shark waits for me to die. Life after life after life. All forgotten. And at the end of every final breath, the gulls laughed in the distance, trying to make the others see, to listen, to remember. It was ceaseless, relentless. In one moment I'm drinking myself to death, hoping someone would find me in a bathtub. In the next I'm outside a bar with a knife in my gut. I'm in the corner of a burning building, but the fireman forgot to look for me. Death after death after death. But I have to keep going. Then, a boy. He didn't want his dad to worry, so he said he would stay with a friend. Instead, he hid in his room, looking at pictures of his mother. He made his own bed, cooked his own dinner. It would be okay. He rarely left the house. He skipped school most days. But there was no point for him to learn, since he couldn't picture a future anyway. He'd get by somehow, or maybe he wouldn't. Maybe it didn't matter. Another voice joining the choir of things that didn't need to be. It was a cruel twist of fate. I couldn't remember him no matter how hard I tried, and even if I knew in my heart of hearts he was among them, I couldn't picture him. But I could remember Anna, and thinking of her eyes and her hair, I could remember him too. I remembered her words, whispering his name as she cradled him, and with those sprinkles of thought, a picture started to form, a name, a shape, a voice. He's afraid of the sea, I said. He'd rather watch YouTube. Is that okay? Asked the boy by the fire. Yeah, I sobbed. That's okay. We can watch together. I took him by the hand. The people in the dark stepped aside. The man by the fire remained silent, watching as we went. And in the distance the gulls laughed, not out of menace or spite, but out of relief. It hasn't been an easy life since then. Both Gaspar and I had healing to do. We had to start talking openly about Anna and the life we would expect without her. It was painful, but necessary. We talked about where we'd celebrate the holidays, where we'd go on holiday, and instead of presuming or hoping, we talked about it, and we made plans. Maybe he'd have a new mother someday. Maybe he'd even have a little brother or sister to play with. He said he'd like that. Whenever I was ready to try, I would have his blessing. I took him out with Simone's boat once. I helped fix it up a bit first. The man is saltier than the sea, but he's honest. I'm surprised how much Gaspar likes him. I think Simone had a soft spot for Gaspar, too. Maybe kids are like gulls in a way. Simple. The gulls don't laugh no more. Not for me. Not for anyone. Now when Simone goes to feed them, I sit next to him. Gaspar does too. And they humbly accept whatever we offer. Hey everyone, and welcome to another video. Tonight we have a single story upload. You all know that I like to do these from time to time, when like a story is especially good and also decently long. Tonight we have a story by the name of Have You Ever Played the Would You Game? It is written by Let's Split Up, and I would like to give a huge thank you to them for allowing me to share this story with all of you. If you do enjoy this video, please be sure to drop a like rating. It helps out the channel immensely. Subscribing if you are new is also very much appreciated, as I post content just like this all of the time. Anyways, sit back, do whatever it is that you do to relax, and as always, I hope you all have a great night. Would you cut off your pinky to get $1 million? Would you kill your cheating spouse to marry the man of your dreams? Would you eat a dog turd to win a year's supply of ice cream? These are the sorts of preposterous questions that make up the Would You game, which is like a deranged cousin of the Would You Rather board game. But unlike the popular board game, the Would You game has real-world stakes. Stakes as high as life or death, or even higher. I found this out the hard way with my sister, Seti. Her actual name is September, but everyone calls her Seti, just like everyone calls me Toby. My actual name is October. And yes, we do hate our parents for this. Seti was always competitive, even when she was very little. But I didn't understand how competitive until she invented the Would You game. We played during boring summers at home. In the beginning, it was just Seti, me, our older sister Jules, July, but everyone calls her Jules, and her best friend, Darren. Darren is the one who added cards to the game, Structure. He was kind of a nerd and liked board games, though he only reluctantly played them with me and Seti, whom he found too young and competitive. The game as it exists today is largely Darren's construction. There are 7 cards, always dealt in order. Would you risk verb, risk noun, to reward verb, reward noun? For example, would you kill your roommate to cure cancer? Most of the time, the randomness of the cards led to absurd sentences. Less like truth or dare and more like Mad Libs. Points were earned through guesses, with fellow players trying to guess whether you would or would not. Often the fun of the game revolved around players justifying their choices. As in, sure, eating a dog turd would be gross, but 2 minutes of gross is worth a full year of delish. It was silly, harmless fun. The fact the game turned into something horrifying is my fault. I knew even at the time I shouldn't have done what I did, but I was furious with Seti. She'd pulled "Would you lick a cockroach?" to get a day home from school, and she said yes. Seti says yes to everything, I pointed out. It's ridiculous. She's lying. She wouldn't do any of these things. I would. Seti, about 7 years old at the time, balled her fists. She was trying very hard to be cool enough to play with her older siblings and keep up with us. You wouldn't, I snapped, sick of her lying. We went back and forth, and finally I declared I was adding a new rule. The challenge rule. Any player could challenge another player, and then the challenge player would have to do the thing they'd said yes to. If they did, the player who'd made the challenge had to give the reward. A day home from school meant I'd cover for her with our parents. Seti's face immediately took on a pink cast. She clearly hadn't anticipated my making up this rule. I, cruel older sibling that I was, challenged her then to lick the cockroach. It wasn't nice, I admit. Tears came into her eyes. She looked at me in disbelief. Seti always looked up to me, idolized me. I'd like to say that in the moment, I regretted what I was doing to her, but at the time, I was just gloating. But little Seti wouldn't be beaten either. Darren went and got a cockroach. He and Jules really should have been chaperoning better, but Darren was just gleeful at the idea of anyone licking a cockroach. He pulled a dead one from one of the traps and laid it out on a napkin in front of her. Seti's lower lip quivered. Her big eyes lifted to mine. Then she leaned forward, squinching her eyes, and stuck her tongue out. The pink tip touched the roach. She licked it, declared Darren, delighted, even as Julie cried, "Ew!" and I exclaimed, "Gross!" But now I owed her a day off school. Triumphant, she squashed the dead roach in the napkin and tossed it into the trash. "I win," she said. "Yeah, well, you licked a roach, which means you lose at life," I retorted. "I win," she declared again. From then on, the challenge rule held, but I should have known it was stupid. Dangerous rule to put into play. The next time we played, the very first card Seti flipped had "kill" written on it. She paused on that card, while Darren's mouth made an O of expense. And Jules and I exchanged troubled glances. Including the kill card was controversial. It sometimes resulted in hilariously absurd combinations, such as, would you kill your butt to become a lost treasure? To an adult, this sort of Mad Libs game is ridiculous. When I was 10, it was hilarious. But of course, the word could also result in some very bad combinations. Seti kept drawing, your sibling, to win this game. She paused, mouth quirking to the side as she considered the cards. "Invalid," declared Jules. No, we can still guess," said Darren, even as Seti slid her answer card. A card that said either yes or no, face down in front of her. "Darren," Jules objected, but Darren was already sliding his card forward as well. Jules and I followed suit, and we all flipped them upright. Darren and Jules had guessed no. My card said yes. I knew my dumb sister, and Seti, Hers also said yes. Knew it, I said, glaring quietly. She smiled back at me serenely. Come on, BS, Darren said, while Jules elbowed him. But Darren ignored her and growled, Challenge. No, said Jules. Oh, no, we're not. What? Darren snapped. It's in the rules. If she kills Toby, she wins the game. He eyed Seti and said pointedly, I'm not going to let her win by cheating or bluffing. Enough, said Jules. My younger sister gathered the cards in front of her, set both her yes and no cards aside, and smoothed her skirt. There was no red face this time, no crying or embarrassment. She stood up, turned to Darren and said, Well, aren't you silly? Don't you know it's just a game? Come on, Toby. Let's go. Something in my stomach nodded as her fingers intertwined mine. It was a relief to know that despite her competitiveness, my sister could recognize when a thing went too far. Suddenly her arm curved round my neck, yanking me back in a chokehold. I slapped at her arms, fingers clawed and pulled at me as my face went purple, and my windpipe felt crushed and speckles blackened my vision. Then she was off me, hauled back by Darren and Jules as she howled, Let me go. Let go. Seti, stop it, hollered Jules. Seti was still screeching as they dragged her to her room. Jesus, she's crazy, growled Darren. Jules declared no more games. If I kill Toby tonight, I win, panted Seti as they locked her in. I win. Say that I win. No one wins, Seti, screamed Jules. I can't believe I even have to say this. I'm telling Mom and Dad. Why do you have to be so crazy? Christ, the game is suspended. Do you understand me? It's over. There are no winners. And we are never playing this game ever again. So that was the end of the Would You game for many years. Seti found other games to play, of course. Less dangerous ones. She was really good at games, and made a fortune with gambling, the lottery, card tournaments, investing. Playing the market was itself a sort of game, she told me. And as with all such ventures, she tackled it with a competitive spirit and almost unmatched skill, though she did suffer some stunning losses occasionally, as a consequence of her tremendous risks. She knew all the tricks of the trade, shuffling tricks, sleight of hand, weighted dice, counting cards. Contrary to what you might believe, she was actually a pretty good sister, most of the time. It was Seti who took care of our parents, making sure their bills were paid and their lawn mowed, and the big house always tidy. She did a lot of the cooking and cleaning herself, before she'd do her makeup and go out for the evening to the casino, or for a drink with business partners. She never went to college, instead keeping house for our parents. But then, she didn't really need college. We had wealth inherited from our grandparents, and Seti multiplied it neatly, managing investments for all of us. She did this with complete transparency and fairness. And while she sometimes gambled heavily with her own money, she never did with ours, always putting it in investments according to our willingness to embrace risk or security. And yet, through my college years, when Seti was finishing high school, she brought back the Would You game, and this time being legally an adult, she had no one to rein her in. I found out about it from Kedar, another boy at her school. He told me how she'd started playing with a group of preppy senior friends. I tried to shrug this off. Whatever. We were all adults now. Surely my sister wouldn't go too crazy, right? It wasn't until later I found out she'd changed the rules again. She and some of the other seniors were playing one day when they decided that the Mad Libs aspect was no longer as entertaining as when we were children, and that players should draw until the cards issued a sentence that the majority agreed made sense. Of course, even then, most of the results were still things that couldn't actually happen, but others, like would you eat bugs to get a winning lotto ticket, were not only perfectly valid combinations but also easy enough to both challenge and reward. And this is exactly what happened when Seti and her friends played. One of them claimed he'd eat bugs to get a winning lotto ticket. She challenged. He ate several ants. So Seti bought lotto tickets until she had a winning one. Granted, it was only for $3, but the cards hadn't specified, had they? And that's how it began. Seti herself becoming a grantor of sorts. Anytime she played the game, she had the money after all. Even back then, our family was well off, and Seti already had a considerable sum saved from her gambling and side hustles. I never knew what she did on the side, but I assume some of it wasn't legal. She could afford to escalate the game, so when a combination came up like, would you dump your boyfriend to earn a new iPhone, Seti could issue the challenge. And when her friend followed through on the dumping, said friend would be gifted with a new phone. It was nonsense, risky, and unhealthy. But not, I guess, more than any other kind of gambling. Until it got worse. Several years later, Seti had some friends over. I'd refused to join. I'd sworn to myself never to play this game. Seti seemed to get even more competitive when I was around, so I kept away from the group, watching from across the living room. Turns kept passing around and everyone was laughing, drinking. A few people were smoking, but that wasn't really my business. Mostly it sounded like absurd stuff. Would you kiss Mrs. Whittinger to save a litter of kittens? Groans. Mrs. Whittinger was the principal at Seti's high school, and in games of kiss, marry, kill, was universally the kill option. Much discussion ensued about whether a litter of kittens would actually die if the player said no to this, and whether the price, having to kiss Mrs. Whittinger, was too high. Seti considered the question, but intertwined her fingers and explained that since the kittens were in the reward deck and not the risk deck, the game would not put kittens in harm's way. In short, kissing will mean you do a good deed, but not kissing won't make you do a bad one, she declared. Thus, if Scott, the player who'd drawn this combination, were to return to their old high school to kiss the loathsome Mrs. Whittinger, a litter of kittens would be rescued, but nothing would happen otherwise. Well, yeah, but if I don't kiss her, some kittens somewhere might not get rescued, so guess I gotta kiss her. Scott grinned at all the groans all around. Challenge, said Seti, almost automatically, almost bored. Scott did indeed end up visiting the high school on a made-up errand, and kissing the principal on the cheek. She was suitably astonished at this affection from a troublesome alum, but also rather touched, and Seti honored her word and awarded Scott by saving a litter of kittens that still occupies our parents' house, where she has devotedly looked after them. But that's not the reason I'm telling you about this game. See, shortly after Scott's draw, another friend, Rosalinda, drew a combination that elicited quite a stir. Would you cut off your finger to gain $1 million? Gasps and whispers all around. Everyone at that party knew that if it was done, Seti could potentially honor the million. This was into her investing years. she had the financial wherewithal for it. And she had granted other gifts before, but never to such an extravagant amount. The most she'd ever given was a gift for a Bahamas trip. "I'd totally do it," said Scott. "No way," said another friend. "No way I'd do that." "But $1 million?" said someone else. "This one's a hypothetical, right?" said another, glancing tentatively to Seti, who just sat back holding her drink with her eyes glimmering and a lazy smile on her face. "Yeah, obviously," said Scott. "I mean, who's got $1 million to give?" "Seti might." "Yeah, right." "Screw it," said Rosalinda, slamming her cards down. "I'm in. Make your picks, people." Everyone voted. Half said yes, half no. Rosalinda flipped her card. Yes. Everyone glanced to Seti, who stood up quietly, moved to the bar to pour herself another drink, and then poured a glass for Rosalinda, too. A glass of strong stuff. She then moved into the kitchen where she opened a drawer. I felt my heart rate increase. Moved to follow Seti, in whose fingers glinted silver. She sterilized the knife over a flame, then brought it to Rosalinda, laying it out on a tray with napkins, bandages, a first aid kit. Rosalinda's eyes grew wide as saucers. Scott whispered, disbelieving. Everyone had gone utterly silent, appalled. I held my breath. "Don't," I thought. "Don't." What should I have done? Called the police? Even now I wonder. No one was forcing Rosalinda to do anything. And yet, Seti sat back in her cushioned chair, idly swirling the bourbon in her glass before downing it. Her eyes glimmered over a smile as she raised her gaze to Rosalinda and whispered, "Challenge." Everyone was dead still. And then Rosalinda picked up the knife. I'll spare you the description of the aftermath of that. The would you cards had said cut your finger off, but they had said nothing about not sewing it back on. Scott put Rosalinda's finger on ice immediately after she cut it off, to the screams of the other players. There were some accusations that Seti was sick, that this all went too far. Then Rosalinda's friends rushed her and her severed finger to the hospital, where it was reattached. And of course, Rosalinda and her friends were somewhat mollified that, shortly afterwards, $1 million was transferred to her bank account. In fact, when word spread, others began seeking out my sister to play. That was when I put my foot down about playing in this house. I said our parents' house couldn't be turned into a gambling den, that I didn't want murders or maiming under their roof, and them to have to deal with cleaning up blood or whatever sick things happened. Seti agreed to take her games elsewhere. I tried to keep out of her business, but occasionally word leaked from our parents, or Jules, or mutual acquaintances, and it seemed like both the risks and rewards were getting bigger. But when things really got out of hand, when I finally put my foot down that it had to stop, was the first time someone died. Before COVID, the games had involved physical risk, even maiming, but had never included death. I wasn't present for the lethal draw, and only found out later that the combination pulled was, would you become haunted by a terrifying ghost to save your child? This particular game took place over Zoom during the height of the pandemic, among a handful of players who won the chance to play via lottery. Seti's games were in high demand. As it turned out, one of the players had an eldest daughter on a ventilator. Now you'd think that any combination involving a ghost would be inherently invalid, After all, it's not like SETI can conjure up the supernatural, but apparently the players agreed to accept it as a valid draw, and the devoted father played yes. Anything for my kids, he said. I viewed the recording of the Zoom later, and after the father played his yes card, SETI's eyes fluttered for several seconds in this strange way, as if she were in a trance, or listening to something no one else could hear. Then her eyes opened and she declared, "Challenge." A few days later, the daughter recovered. But it wasn't until said daughter messaged me, begging me to intervene, that I understood how deranged the game had become. The man who answered the door in his bathrobe had eyes, red-rimmed from weeping, a week's worth of beard stubbling his gaunt face. Without a word, he let me into his house, and as he shuffled away from me, I noticed burn marks on the walls, not in any obvious pattern, but here and there marring the wallpaper. He pointed to a pile of framed photographs stacked on the sofa. They'd formerly been hung on the walls, I realized, but he'd taken them down because in every single photo, he had been burned out, leaving the rest of his family intact. That was how the wallpaper had been charred. There was also, I noticed, a burn mark in the shape of a handprint on his arm. While the father wearily offered me tea, I picked up one of the photos, the backing and part of the glass damaged from the heat. Is it just the burn marks, or is other stuff going on? The lights, he whispered as he stirred the tea. The shrieks and banging at night, the handprints, the dreams, and this. He pulled open a drawer full of children's drawings scrawled by his daughter and her siblings, kept from when they were very little. In all the drawings, he had been scratched out, and a blackened figure, like a shadow, seemed to be looming behind him, its hands on his shoulders. "She's obviously hired someone to come and do all this," I said. "You're probably having nightmares from the stress." No way would I believe that SETI could summon ghosts. But I absolutely believe she had the resources to make a man think she had. The defiled children's drawings especially left me chilled. How had she identified which figure in the child's scrolls was him? I offered to stay the night, to confront whoever SETI had hired and chase them off, and I promised I would contact my sister in the morning and put an end to this so-called haunting. The man seemed relieved by my assurances that all the spooky effects were staged, yet he also requested me not to interfere. He was clearly anxious that if he didn't let things continue, his daughter would fall sick again. I tried to assure him that SETI didn't have that kind of power and couldn't make her relapse, but he insisted I keep out of it. Privately, I decided to speak to SETI anyway. She was overseas, however. The man killed himself before she got back, hung himself from the staircase, leaving his beloved daughter and her siblings to mourn. I waited in our parents' house for my sister the night she returned. She'd barely gotten off the plane a half hour earlier, but despite what must have been a wearying flight, she waltzed through the front door in a glitzy suit like she'd stepped out of Vegas. Seeing me, she spread her arms wide in greeting. "How could you?" I snarled. She dropped her arms, though her smile didn't falter. "Toby, dear, I didn't. Whatever it is you're upset about, it was the cards." "A ghost, SETI?" "A terrifying ghost," she corrected. "Of course it wasn't a ghost, SETI," I bellowed, shaking with fury. "The funeral had been 2 days ago. The only terrifying thing here is you, for hounding a man to death. You drove him to this. It's you who fulfills the challenges, who delivers the rewards. Admit it. You paid for his daughter to get special treatment. I looked into it. You couldn't guarantee it, but you did everything you could to make sure she'd recover, didn't you? And when she did, you made him suffer. He had to complete the challenge. She pursed her lips, silent for a moment, then finally said, "What if I did? What if you did?" I couldn't believe her. "Seti, you drove a man to his death." "You said that already." She looked bored. "So, I made a man terrified. He chose to kill himself." "BS, you killed him, as much as if you handed him the rope." "Oh, he chose hanging?" "Seti." I paused and added, low and serious, "You have to stop this." That stilled her. She was silent a moment, eyes shadowed by the brim of her hat, crimson lips pursed. Finally, a curl to her mouth. "Make me." "What?" "Make me stop," she repeated, and languidly took a chair at the coffee table, indicating for me to do the same. I stared in horror as she pulled out a deck. "One game," she declared, eyes glittering. "A duel. You win, I stop and never play again. You can have your wish." "No." "Toby, people pay thousands to play with me. You don't know what a deal you're getting. Besides, it's the only way to make me stop." She again indicated the chair. I just stared at her, fists clenched. "Why?" "Because, Toby dear, our mother and father's beloved who can do no wrong. Because we never finished our game. Remember when we were little? We started to play, but things went too far. We couldn't end it. I won't be left at a stalemate. Finish the game with me, dearest Toby, golden child, the one Mom and Dad always loved best." "They love you too." "They love me like the alcoholic loves the bottle, a terrible influence they secretly wish they could obliterate. And it's true, I am terrible, but perfect. Good Toby. Win against me, and I will stop." Her eyebrows shot up. Reluctantly, dread building in my gut, I sat down opposite her. I threw out one more feeble argument. "We don't have enough players. I won't let anyone else get involved." "We don't need other players," she corrected. "A duel game is a two-player version. It has a few extra rules, like the double dare. It's where you take your opponent's challenge and double it. So, for instance, if it's, 'Would you kill a kitten?' and I accept, you'd have to kill two." Great example. "How are your cats, by the way?" "All very well, as it happens. They haven't been drawn into any games." She flashed a wicked smile at me as one of said cats, oblivious to the danger it would be put in should Seti draw any cards that involved pets, came over and rubbed against her leg, purring. She explained the rules of the duel game as she shuffled. It was basically the same as the regular game, but answers were scored differently. 1 point for yes, 1 point for correct guesses, 0 points for no, 0 points for wrong guesses, 10 points for a completed challenge. If a challenge went unfulfilled, it was an automatic loss. If more than one challenge was fulfilled for the same reward, only the most recent challenge would gain the reward. The game would continue until each player had drawn 10 valid combinations. Getting points for saying yes automatically skews the game in your favor, I observed. It skews the game in favor of playing more boldly, yes, Seti agreed, but it's still possible for you to win. I glowered. Seti allowed me to draw first. Would you dance with rotting human entrails to earn a dream vacation? Tame by the current standards of the game. I started to put down my no card, but then remembered I'd get 0 points for it. Of course I put down yes. Said he would manage to make those rotting entrails appear, and I didn't even want to think about whether they'd really be human or not. I sighed and pushed forward yes. Seti also slid a card forward. Both of us flipped. Both of us said yes. 1 point for me, 1 for Seti for guessing correctly. I waited for the inevitable challenge, but she only smiled. "You're not going to challenge?" I asked. "No, because you'll actually do it, and you'll get 10 points," she replied. "And obviously, you'll get a dream vacation too, but I'd rather save my money for more interesting rewards." Seti's turn. She flipped the cards slowly. "Would you fly to Stinky Toenails to gain your name on Mars?" Invalid, obviously. She drew again. "Would you sing loudly to the president to save world peace?" Another invalid combination. Seti drew 3 more nonsense sentences before finally coming up with a valid combination. "Would you kiss a bowl of diarrhea to get a year's supply of ice cream?" "Ugh," I said. "This is such a dumb game." Seti smiled and pushed a card forward. I rolled my eyes and did the same. We both flipped. "Yes." "Of course you would," I said, disgusted. "You could challenge," she offered. "And give you 10 points? Screw that." We went back and forth a couple more rounds. My hands were shaking. Soon we got to challenges I wouldn't do. I started playing no. Seti always played yes. She was gaining points, and didn't challenge me on the rare times I drew something I felt I could do. And then, as we were approaching the 10th round, that would end the game. Seti drew a combination that made my breath catch. "Would you skin yourself to win the game?" Seti was already ahead. If I didn't challenge her, she'd win. If I challenged her and she refused, she'd lose. The smart play here would be to pick no. She wouldn't risk anything. She was way ahead of me anyway. The game would end on the next turn. All she had to do was miss 1 point by playing her no card. Playing yes was something only a complete idiot would do. But Seti had never played no, not in any of the turns we'd had so far. Would she now? Seti looked me in the eyes as she put down her card, smiled almost apologetically with a little shrug. Oh, how that smile infuriated me. The lightness of it, the willingness to throw everything down in this stupid, idiotic, foolish game. And she was already guaranteed to win. I played my card. We flipped them over. Yes. Fury coursed through me. It was like when we were kids all over again, and Seti would brazenly claim she'd do something outrageous, when all of us knew she really wouldn't. When she'd bluff, and I'd call her on it, and the words spat from my lips before I could think to stop it, because how dare she mock me like this, playing like her life hardly mattered. Challenge. It was strange. The expressions that flickered across Seti's face. Regret, fear, angst, rage. For just a moment she reminded me of that little girl again. The little girl who idolized me, who just wanted to be brave enough to impress me, until I called her out for going too far. And every single time she forced herself to rise to my challenge. Remembering that, I suddenly regretted my actions. Seti's eyelids closed, fluttering, as if she were coming to terms with what had just happened. Then without a word she rose to her feet. My parents did a lot of barbecuing in the summers, even the occasional pig roast or carving up venison. I wondered with horror if among the many implements in this grandly furnished house, they might have a skinning knife. "Seti, wait," I cried, seizing her arm as she turned away. "I forfeit. You hear me? I forfeit. You win. I withdraw my challenge." "What?" she stammered. You can't forfeit. That's not how it works. Too bad. I'm done. Toby, she shrieked as I grabbed my jacket and rushed for the door. You agreed to finish the game. Yeah, bite me. I ducked out and slammed the door. From inside, a howl of anguish. High, keening, practically inhuman. God, said he could be so scary. I hurried away, trying to force the horrible, stupid game from my consciousness, trying to forget how irrational Seti could be. My phone buzzed. Seti sent 5 different messages, one containing 3 devil emojis. Another, we're not finished. We have 1 turn left. Toby, 1 turn. Ending off a lot of them with exclamation marks. She carried on like that all night. I silenced my phone. In the morning, I had so many messages I blocked her. I fully expected calls from our parents, Jules, or our mutual acquaintances. Email, messenger, voicemails at work. Maybe a single telegram. Seti had a huge network, and I knew my sister had 1,000 ways to contact me. There would be no escaping her wrath until the game was over. And yet, silence. Not so much as a peep. It was this complete absence of communication that unsettled me more than anything. I called our parents, Jules, friends, but they hadn't heard from Seti. Not wanting them to worry, I lied to everyone, and said I was just checking in because it had been a while. With every hour, the knot of dread in my gut tightened. Finally, 3 days after our fateful game, there came a knock at my door. I'd been in a state of suspension so long that my first feeling was relief. At last. We'd get this over with. I went to the door, calling out, "Who's there?" To no response. I peeked through the peephole, but it was covered. Sigh. Just like Seti to play games. Maybe it really was a singing telegram. I opened the door. "Hello?" The word died on my lips, shifting from hello to hell in what, looking back, seems chillingly appropriate. On the threshold stood a costumed figure. She was reminiscent of the Easter Bunny. Huge black eyes, plush fur around chipmunkish cheeks, buck teeth and mauve fur, with a fluffy white belly. This wasn't sophisticated like a cosplay persona. No. This was more the mall-grade Easter variety, vaguely creepy and unsettling, like a costumed theme park character or a Chuck E. Cheese animatronic. I'd always had a dread of such characters, even as a child. Something about the fakery of the costuming was so off-putting. Now that same unease prickled through me as the bunny spread its arms in a ta-da pose. I said. I stepped back and held open the door, trying to ignore the small voice that wondered what I might see if I lifted the mask off that bunny suit. The bunny strolled in with an exaggerated happy stride, reminding me, again, of a costumed character. Who could ever tell what was underneath such a suit? The bunny pulled out 2 chairs from my dining table and patted one for me. "Seti?" I said. The bunny pulled a card from a pocket somewhere in its fur and held it up for me to read. One more turn. "How do I know it's you? Take off that dumb thing." A head shake. The bunny pointed again to the card, exaggeratedly tapping it and nodding to me. Its suit smelled faintly of copper and maybe something else. Sweat. Body odor. No. It was more unpleasant than that, like the smell of a dead mouse I'd found once in a trap rotting for days. And I wondered, what was under that suit? She wouldn't have done it, would she? She couldn't have and survived. This had to be an act. To make me fret. Think that she'd done something crazy. I looked into those bunny eyes, black mesh. I thought I could just glimpse the whites of her eyes, a faint gleam as she looked out at me. Again, that coppery smell. And as we both sat at the coffee table, there was, I could see, very clearly now, blood dripping from the suit of the bunny. A faint dribble of it. How badly was she bleeding in there? Or was it all an act? Would she even be bleeding still? Would blood really drip through the costume? God, Seti, fine. I'll play the last turn, and if I win, you'll take off that suit and you'll be just fine underneath. Alright? Deal? You'll be whole and fine. The bunny made a sound in the affirmative. It was Seti's voice, but sounded wrong, like the vocal cords were somehow deteriorated. It reached into a pocket somewhere in the suit, handed me the would you cards. My turn. Hands shaking, I shuffled. I could see now a couple of places where the mauve fur was darker, wet with stains. But it can't be real, I thought. No way it can be real. I swallowed the bile in my throat and dealt the cards. Would you? My hands trembled as I turned each one. Disappear yourself to win this game. Disappear? Did that mean die and my life, or like witness protection disappear? The meaning was unclear, but I couldn't pick no, or Seti would win. And somehow I knew what would happen if she won. That she would lift off her mask and underneath there would be... I pushed forward my card, and the bunny pushed forward hers. And we flipped. Yes. The bunny spoke. One word. I tried not to imagine its skinless tongue slurring. Challenge. My heart quickened. Fine, I said. You, Mom, Dad, Jules, everyone we know. You'll never see me again. The rest of my life, no matter how hard you look or how you spend your resources to come after me, I will not be found. I'll be gone, and when I am, I'll have won the game. As I spoke, I felt the air shiver between us. It was as if something had writ my words in my soul, and I knew, as deeply and suddenly, and surely as I knew my own name, that I would disappear so thoroughly, I would effectively cease to exist. Somehow, I was incredibly calm about all this. Goodbye, Seti. I turned and grabbed my bag and walked out. I drove to our parents' house to tell them that I loved them. They were extraordinarily perplexed when I greeted them each with a tight embrace, and even more so when I begged them to please look after Seti for me. I just hoped it was enough to save my sister. That whatever was under that suit was all part of the drama to draw me in, and everything would return to normal after the game. I just had to disappear. Who? Said Dad. He was a bit hard of hearing. Seti. September, I told him. What's happening in September? Asked Mom. No, Mom, I'm talking about Seti. I stopped, staring at the mantle. A few days ago, I'd been here playing with Seti, and the photos on the mantle had been the same vacation trips as always. Goofy images of Seti, me, and Jules playing as children. But now I was looking at the exact same photos, and it was only me and Jules. Mom, meanwhile, nudged Dad and murmured, Sweetie, remember how Toby used to pretend to have a little sister? Oh gosh, that's right. Dad brightened and turned to me. And whenever you did something bad, you'd blame it on September. But I was already out the door, rushing back to the game. I'd declared I would disappear. From the present moment on, I'd be gone, but Seti? I checked my phone, my email, messages. But there were no photographs, no texts, no social media evidence my sister had ever existed, present or past. I called Jules, but she said the same thing as our parents. That Seti was the imaginary little sister I made up to blame for the worst outcomes of a childhood game. A game I designed. A game for which I am the guarantor. A game slash have been hosting among various groups and players for the past few years. And when I at last got home and rushed inside, the bunny was no longer at the table, but the cards were still laid out. A note scrawled beside them on a bloody napkin. Double dare. People still contact me asking why I ended the game. The truth is, the napkin, the only proof of SETI, written in her own distinctive handwriting, disintegrated with time, and I'm not even sure myself what I believe anymore. But I'll tell you this. If anyone ever offers to play the would you game, no matter what the prize, do not do it. It's not worth it. Learn from my mistakes, and never, ever play the would you game. Hey everyone, I hope you're doing well. Tonight we have 2 hours of horror stories. I hope you all enjoy them. If you do, please be sure to drop a like rating. Let's see if we can reach 600 likes on this one. It's been a little while since we've reached 600 likes on a video, so I don't know. It might be a bit of a high goal, but I'm curious to see if we could get there. Subscribing if you are new is also very much appreciated, as I post content just like this all of the time. I usually post a 2-hour video roughly every 5 days, and I post a monthly video that is 10 plus hours long, so if that's something that you're interested in, be sure to subscribe. Anyways, sit back, do whatever it is that you do to relax, and as always, I hope you all have a great night. We moved into this apartment in February, just me and my daughter, Ivy. It's not much, but it's ours. 5th floor, decent view, rent just barely affordable. The building is old with creaky pipes and paper-thin walls, but it's quiet and no one bothers us. Ivy is 4. She's bright and weird in the best way. Loves bugs, talks to stuffed animals like they're old friends. Invents strange stories on the fly. I've always encouraged her imagination. Kids need that, especially after what we've been through. At first it was just a normal play. She'd crawl on the floor with her dolls, press her ear to the wood like she was listening for something. I asked her once what she was doing and she told me, "He talks funny when he's sleepy." I didn't think much of it, thought she was mimicking a TV character or something. A few days later, while brushing her teeth, she pointed to the floor and asked if I could tell the man to stop watching her. I froze, not scared, just thrown. "What man?" I asked. She pointed to the floor again. "The one who lives under the wood." I gave her a confused smile. "Honey, there's nobody under there. We're on the 5th floor, remember?" She didn't respond, just rinsed and spat like nothing happened. That night I checked the floor while she slept. The boards were dusty but solid. No gaps, no loose panels. Still, I knelt down and tapped a few spots. Hollow, but not unusual. Old floors always sound like that. Over the next week, Ivy started avoiding the hallway. She would step around specific boards like they were hot. She stopped sleeping in her bed and would sneak into mine without saying a word. When I asked her why, she'd just whisper, "He gets louder at night." I started keeping the TV on while she fell asleep. White noise, comfort. Still, I'd catch her glancing toward the floor in the middle of a show, like she was waiting for something. Then, 2 nights ago, I woke to a loud pop, like a board snapping under weight. I rushed to her room. She was sitting upright in bed, wide-eyed, staring at the floor. I asked what happened. She pointed to a spot near the corner of the room. One of the floorboards was slightly raised. Barely noticeable, but it hadn't been like that before. I pressed down on it. It gave a little. like something beneath had pushed upward. "Did you drop something under there?" I asked. Ivy didn't answer. She just whispered, "You touched his door." Last night I barely slept. Every creak of the building made me tense. I turned on every light, sat in the living room until morning. This morning I went to the kitchen to make coffee and found a piece of paper tucked behind the cereal box. Ivy's drawing, crayon on lined notebook paper. A stick figure girl stood in a square room. Beneath her feet, a black figure was drawn in a pit of jagged lines, reaching upward with arms too long for its body. In the corner of the drawing was a sentence written in shaky, childish letters. "He said you shouldn't have touched his door." I'm not sure if I'm more afraid that Ivy drew it, or that she didn't. This is hard to talk about. I know how it's going to sound. If I hadn't lived through it, I'd scroll past this too, but if you've got kids, especially really young ones, maybe read this before you go to bed tonight. Or don't. I wish I hadn't waited. My son Jacob is 5. Smart kid. Sweet. A little obsessed with dinosaurs and drawing, like most boys his age. He's never had any health issues. Never had night terrors. Until 6 weeks ago. It started small. Stuff that's easy to shrug off. He woke me up one night around 2 a.m. just standing in the hallway staring into the dark. When I asked what he was doing, he said, "I was listening to the floor." I laughed it off. Kids say weird things. But then he started waking up with weird questions like, "Where did the basement go?" Or, "What happened to the boy who used to sleep here?" We live in an apartment. There is no basement. And Jacob's had this room since he was born. It got worse. He'd cry when I tried to tuck him in and say stuff like, "I don't want to go back in the hole," or "He's watching from the wall crack." I cut all screen time. No scary books. Asked his preschool if anything happened there. Nothing. He's the happiest kid during the day, but every night around 2 to 3 a.m., I'd catch him awake, talking to someone, whispering, always smiling. Then he stopped calling me Mom. He started calling me Elaine. That's not my name. I asked him who Elaine was, and he said, "You, before, when the house was still burning." He said it like I should know what he meant. A week later, I found his drawings. Pages of stick figures. All normal except for one. A tall, stretched-out shadow with black arms that touched the ground and a wide hole in its chest. It appeared over and over, always standing beside a little boy. Jacob called it the Keeper. He said, "The Keeper lives under where the bricks were." I asked what bricks. He said, "The bricks they buried me under." That night I barely slept. I did some digging the next day. Turns out our apartment complex was built in the early 90s. Before that, it was a group foster home. Burned down in 1989. 7 children died, all under 10. One body was never recovered. His name was Eli Matthews. I found a newspaper article. There was a grainy photo. Jacob looks exactly like him. Same chin, same freckles, same scar above the eyebrow. I showed it to my mother without explaining, and she asked me when Jacob took that old-timey photo. The next night I caught him digging at the floor of his closet with a spoon. When I asked him what he was doing, he looked up and smiled. Not a 5-year-old smile. He's almost done fixing the hole. Once it's open, I have to go back. I asked who. He said, the keeper. He promised I'd get my real mom back. Last night I got a phone call at exactly 2:13 a.m. No caller ID, just static and breathing. Then a voice, low, cracked like it came from inside a wall. Elaine, he was never yours. I ran to Jacob's room. He was standing in the corner facing the wall, smiling. He turned to me and said, he found the basement. There is no basement. This morning I checked his closet again. I noticed the carpet was slightly raised in the corner. Underneath it was a wooden trapdoor. I swear wasn't there before. Update. I opened it. There's a staircase and it goes down. I'm posting this from my phone. I'm taking a flashlight. I'm going in. I don't know what else to do. If you don't hear from me again, don't let him leave the house. In the days following marriage, there was a weird sort of hold that tradition had on us. Custom dominated sense, and culture preceded reason. One of those traditions was that the bride had to be fetched to the groom's village at midnight. Always midnight. Folks said it was to guard her modesty, to make sure no stranger saw her face before she moved into her new home. But I always figured it was a matter of fear. Superstition masquerading as ritual. No one challenged it. No one dared. That night, as with so many nights before me, I was one of the men who were called to escort the bride. I was not her brother, but I was a cousin, close enough by blood to accept the honor and heavy enough with obligation to not refuse. 2 of us walked behind the bullock cart, sticks in hand, keeping watch under the moon. The cart creaked like an old bone with every turn of the wheel. The bride was concealed inside, wrapped in silence, shrouded behind folds of cloth and tradition. The village was hours away from here, and the road twisted through empty fields and dense, whispering forests. The air was chill but had a stillness that made even the insects reluctant. All that could be heard was the gentle crunch of our footsteps on the ground, the oxen's sigh, and occasionally the ghostly hoot of an owl in the distance. As we strolled past a small pond, a dark sheet of still water under the stars, I saw something scurrying around its rim. I looked into the blackness. It had looked like a fox, a thin and small one, its nose twitching as it dug in the rubbish left by travelers. Maybe it was its wild movements that caught my eye. Maybe it was the way it stared at me when it saw me looking. Half jestingly, I said, "Why look there when you can ride with us? We have plenty to fill you up for days in our village." I laughed softly to myself. My partner shot me a sidelong look but remained silent. At the time I felt strangely proud of my joke, as though I had uttered something witty into the darkness. We proceeded further, but the night wasn't forgetful. 10 minutes or so after that, I heard the faintest noise behind us, a shuffle or a dragging foot. I turned and there it was, the fox, only it wasn't quite the same. It was bigger now, its fur wet or perhaps gone in patches. It trailed behind at a distance, keeping just far enough back to be just on the edge of sight in the dark. I laughed nervously and thumped my stick on the ground. "Shoo, go eat somewhere else," I said, trying to be bolder than I felt. The creature hesitated, tilted its head, but didn't flee. My cousin turned around and saw it too. "Foxes don't follow people like that," he complained. "Maybe it's sick." I replied. I don't believe it. I kept looking over my shoulder more than I looked where I was going. The beast trailed behind, steady and slow, as if it were somehow held to us. Each time I glanced back at it, it looked less fox. Its gait was unnatural, too smooth, too silent. Its eyes had lost that animal glint and now simply reflected nothing. No fear, no curiosity, nothing. Then came the moment that changed everything. I turned once again, and what I saw rooted me to the ground. It was not a fox. It was not even a beast. It was on 4 legs, but its body was naked, smooth and long. Holes pockmarked its skin, as if decay had taken a hold years ago, but it still had a purposeful movement. It was the length of a calf, contorted and curved in shape, but appallingly alive. It looked at me as if it had heard the joke I had told and had accepted the invitation. I remained there. My heart was beating so fast that I was afraid to wake the bride. My cousin bent forward and whispered, What is that?" But I couldn't answer. I knew in my very bones that we could not bring it into the village, so I did the best I could think to do. I approached it slowly on foot, shaking with every step. I placed my stick in front of me as a sign of surrender, then went down on my knees. "Please," I whispered. "I've done something wrong. There is nothing there for you where we're going. I've made a false statement. Don't follow us, please." The creature didn't move. It stared at me, empty eyes unblinking. For a moment I was convinced it was about to pounce, but then, with a slight shift of its odd head, or perhaps a readjustment of its odd body, it wheeled westward and left. No noise, no sign, silent and away. It disappeared into the darkness, consumed by the night. I just stood there for what seemed like forever before I could walk again. My cousin and I never said a word to one another as we walked. We did not even glance to see if the beast would return. We did not care. 1 week later, word came from the west. Village after village, sick, people dying in scores. Some said it was malaria. Others said it was a curse. I remembered the holes on that creature's skin, the way it walked, the silence it carried with it. I remembered what I had said, what I had invited. Was it me? I kept asking myself over and over. Did I unleash something? The shame clung to me like dust, heavy and smothering. I starved for days. I could not sleep without seeing its face, or what amounted to one. Each evening I caught myself gazing out to the west, half hoping to see its shape materialize on the horizon, coming back to claim the rest of what I had vowed. Years went by, and the sensation never faded. The bride and groom went on with their lives, and other people quickly forgot that evening. But I did not. I could not. Certain errors diminish with the passing of time, but some cast a shadow. I had laughed in the darkness, and something had listened, something that did not laugh. And now, even years later, I find myself wondering, was that thing the disease carrier, a ghost, a demon, or was it something created by guilt, born from a coincidence so terrible it could not be overlooked? I don't know. All I know is this: some invitations are not meant to be spoken, and if they've done so, they cannot be taken back anymore. She always questioned why I was wearing makeup. Is it for a boy? Why are you wearing it today and not yesterday? Why are you doing it differently today? Back in high school, I could never catch a break from her. She was my best friend since middle school, and there were literally zero boundaries between us in her mind. We had the same classes, sang in chorus together, and went to the same church. But even though her questions like these were irksome, it was best to not confront her head on, which I think I always knew subconsciously, even before knowing what I do now. I have a taciturn and deeply non-confrontational personality, so back then I would rather die than say the truth, which is to say I'd never admit to wanting to look attractive out loud. So I'd pretend that I did my makeup absent-mindedly just to end the conversation. We basically did the same song and dance every time I wore makeup. I found that it was just easier to lie, or, more often than not, just to not wear it. My looks and self-esteem be damned. More than anything else are the things that I remember about my early high school days. When I think back to all those drawn-out hours with her at school, carpool, chorus events, summer camps, I remember specific things like her questions about my makeup, any changes to my hair, new clothes, etc. And not to sound like a queen bee, but it also seemed like if I bought anything new, she would too. Jewelry, keds, dresses, ringtones for my cell phone. We had plenty of laughs and good times too, but the feelings that have persisted are the ones of insecurity and exhaustion from avoiding being on her bad side. I also remember her being a really tough hang. I couldn't bring any new friends or acquaintances around. She was loud, talkative, and needlessly abrasive to new people. If you looked up RFB in a dictionary, you'd see a picture of her being around someone she didn't know already. She was also an oversharer, especially with gross body stuff, and an over-communicator. I couldn't log on to AIM without her already being there, literally at all hours of the night. She called anytime she was driving from one place to another, and I learned that it was better to always answer, even if it was terrible timing. One time, I passive-aggressively didn't answer when she called. After 5 minutes, I gave her a call back. She didn't answer, but she returned my call immediately. I didn't answer her again, and then called her right back. Guess what? She didn't answer, but again, she called me right back. We did this back and forth a couple more times. It felt obnoxious in the moment, and even more so in hindsight. I came to the conclusion that she would never answer when I called. She'd only call me. One time I literally couldn't bring myself to answer. I was in one of those moods where I couldn't stomach even a 5-minute conversation. So I texted her and said I couldn't talk and asked what was up. She never texted me back and literally didn't speak to me for an entire week. Apparently she was going through something and really needed me that day. But honestly, I don't believe that it was anything out of the ordinary. I don't remember what eventually broke the silence between us after that tiff, but I remember feeling happy that we were on speaking terms again. After less than a day, it was like it never happened. Now, to the day that changed everything. It was a normal school day in late April, definitely in that post-spring break season where the sun is shining, and it's torture to be cooped up in a classroom. Another one of her quirks is that she had to know what I scored on every test and likewise would tell me what she scored. It was a frustrating expectation of hers. She had a habit of calling herself an intellectual, without even a hint of irony, mind you. But in truth, she was very, very smart, so she usually scored higher than I did. But one time in English, I aced a test while she got something worse but respectable, like an 87. She asked what I got as soon as the teacher gave me my test back. I pretended not to hear her and put it face down on my desk while I rummaged in my backpack. In a flash, she stood up, reached across and grabbed my test before I knew what was happening. It was all so aggressive and happened so rapidly that I couldn't help but shoot her a nasty, what the hell kind of look. I remember us having an uncomfortable beat or two of eye contact, and then her looking at my test, after which her face darkened severely. Whether it was my test result or my honest reaction to her invading my privacy and personal space, I had deeply offended her. What made matters worse is that everyone noticed, since it was a sort of violent disruption to a quiet classroom. After that incident, again I got the silent treatment, but this stretched far more than 2 weeks. She was not speaking to me in the mornings at carpool. She skipped chorus events, and at school it was just strange. I would look in her direction and she'd pretend to not notice me, but when I wasn't looking, I could feel her watching me. It was so weird, but I was not in a hurry to mend fences with her. One day after school, I got a text from her. This was so many years and phones ago, so I don't remember specifics, but it had something to do with a school assignment. There was no apology or warmth, or even an attempt to awkwardly address the situation. The text was so random, and I felt like she was fishing for a reaction, so I didn't answer. I wanted to actually have a conversation, and if she couldn't handle that, then I was also fine just moving on. I wasn't going to let her dictate how we were going to resolve things. Later that night, she sent another message on AIM that asked if I saw her text, and also if she could come over right then. I logged off immediately so I wouldn't feel compelled to answer. It was all really weird. She wasn't at school the next day. I didn't think too much of it, except that it was refreshing to not have to ignore her for a full school day. That afternoon, one of our assistant principals showed up to my biology classroom and asked for me to accompany him to the principal's office. My principal began asking me questions about my friend and about her interest in computers, which I didn't know how to answer. I said that she was a whiz at AIM, but that's about all I knew. Turns out, my friend had made a hit list naming me directly. My principal had printed it out for me to read, and it was some of the most vulgar things I've ever heard. He explained that she tried using an offshore router in her email to the school the day before, but they were able to easily pinpoint her IP address and alert the actual authorities. From there, my recollection gets blurry, but I remember getting a police escort home from school that day with a helicopter overhead and everything. She was sent to juvenile detention, and then eventually to a girls-only mental institution in Florida for a short stint. I don't think she was ever formally convicted, but she was expelled. Her family moved that summer a few towns away and enrolled her at a private school. My principal would check in on me randomly from that point until I graduated a few years later. I think he did that because he wanted to let me know that the administration was thinking about me, but I'm sure he was also angling to see if I received any threats, which I, thankfully, never did. So many years have passed, and I honestly don't think about those days too often. They were confusing and frustrating years, and the meeting with the principal and the fallout with my friend happened in quick succession. Every now and again I'll see her on social media, and her name comes up here and there in conversations with family or old friends. I'm writing this all to give context. She just messaged me on social media, and I'm not sure what to do. I was terrified. Still am, if I'm being honest. It's not every day your guitar amp gets possessed. Here's what happened. My guitar amp started picking up a random radio station. Initially it was faint, barely above a whisper. I just grumbled, then went back to practicing whatever I was working on. Probably something by Brandon Lake. The next morning, I'd completely forgotten about it. I had other problems. This was a dark period in my life. After spending my 20s touring in a Christian alt country band, I decided to settle down and find gainful employment. Is there such a thing these days? Perhaps I'd find a partner and get married. Simple pleasures, right? Well, I did find employment. Although I wouldn't call working at an outlet store selling shoes gainful. Around that time, I'd lost interest in playing music. In fact, I'd gone a full year without touching my guitar. I was emotionally drained, having spent most of my young adult life touring crummy venues and crashing in cheap motels. To make matters worse, no matter how hard I tried, I couldn't find a partner. This saddened me. Probably that's why I picked up the old Fender Telecaster again. Shame me if you will, but I knew if I performed at some open jams on the weekend, my chances of finding an interesting partner would greatly improve. It's worked in the past. You see, I'm socially awkward. A wee bit on the spectrum, perhaps. Picking up women was never my forte. I'd sooner sit on a frozen toilet seat than approach some good-looking stranger in a bar. Yikes. And online dating just isn't my bag, you dig? Tried once and failed miserably. I still prefer meeting people the old-fashioned way, in person, even though the process eludes me. When I'm performing music, however, they approach me. It's how I meet people. It's my superpower. Anyways, back to the amp. The following weekend, while I was plucking away on my electric guitar, it happened again. My amp was picking up a random radio station. Only this time, it was loud and clear. It scared the hair right off my head. What was left of it anyways. The DJ spoke in a low-pitched, sardonic voice. Something about his voice sounded off. It was too harsh, for starters. Like a chainsaw. Voices don't sound like that. Human voices, that is. His drawl was as deep as a Leonard Cohen song. A drawl that can only come from the deep south. Eastern Kentucky, perhaps, but not quite. It was unlike any voice I'd ever heard. I live in St. Paul, Minnesota, in a crummy one-bedroom apartment, nowhere near the south, so you can imagine my confusion. The voice speed talked for about a minute, while I stood stupefied, scratching my head. Ultimately, I chalked it up to a faulty patch cord and kept picking away at Sturgill Simpson's version of a Nirvana song. When the DJ spoke my name, I nearly died. "Hey, Noah," the voice croaked. "You gonna learn to play that thing or what?" I dropped my guitar pick and watched it bounce underneath the bed. "Welcome to WDVL 666 on your earthly dial." The voice went on as if nothing was out of the ordinary, as if he hadn't just spoken my name. "Hail Satan, he's the truth, the light, and the darkness." The voice rumbled on, speaking so fast he barely had time to breathe. Meanwhile, I was trembling, my bladder threatening to burst. That the DJ knew my name troubled me most. I wondered what else he knew. Did he know my faith was weakening, or that I'm a sinner? With a flick of the wrist, I turned off the amplifier. His grim voice died an awful death. I gulped. My right leg was twitching 1,000,000 miles per hour. What's going on? Was something wrong with me? Clearly there was. But what? I wasn't taking drugs. I rarely drank alcohol, nor was I on any meds. I wasn't a weirdo. The people at work seemed to like me, and I wasn't living in some random haunted house. This made 0 sense. Needless to say, I avoided the amplifier, choosing instead to practice on my acoustic guitar. Problem was, I could barely strum the damn thing. My hands were so shaky. That night, sleep was futile. My mind was racing, so instead of tossing and turning, I did some research and discovered that the problem was, in fact, my faulty patch cord. Just as suspected. The next day, after work, I went to a local guitar store and purchased a new one. Paid a hefty price, but I wanted the very best. Guitar stuff isn't cheap, let me tell you. When I returned home, the guitar amp seemed larger than life, lurking joylessly in the corner of my bedroom, daring me to plug it in. Every time I'd pick up my electric guitar, ready to blast out some chords, my anxiety skyrocketed, and I'd put it down. My nerves were shot. I started talking to myself. Not a good sign. I had to do something. This was getting ridiculous. So, at long last, I plugged the shiny new cable into my amp, a Fender 68 Custom Deluxe Reverb, for all you gearheads, and started rocking out. Nothing. No devilish DJ, no random radio station, just pure, angelic Fender tone. Phew. Relieved, I set about working on some Johnny Cash songs. Who doesn't like the Man in Black? While I was belting out Ring of Fire, giving it all I had, the unthinkable happened. The dreadful DJ returned. Hell yes, my son. You will, in fact, burn in a ring of fire. Lord below, Satan is the way, the truth, and the answer. Give in to him, and he shall fulfill your deepest, darkest desires. I froze. My tongue felt like a sponge. My hands as big as baseball gloves. My blood turned to ice. Something about the voice paralyzed me. It was like he was in my room, delivering his diabolical sermon directly to me. That's right, Noah, he sneered. Give in to Satan, the Lord of Death, and he shall deliver salvation. You want a partner? A luscious, beautiful blonde? I'll bet you do. Or how about a busty brunette? Yes, sir. A gal that loves her country music. I unplugged the cord, hoping that would stop him. It didn't. Nah, he continued louder than before. What you really need, Noah, my hapless human friend, is a fiery redhead. Lord below, one that'll suck the paint off your porch, if you know what I mean. I don't care to intrude, Noah, but you're looking awfully thin these days. I do reckon. And I turned off the amp. It crackled and popped, then went silent. My beating heart, which was louder than a bass drum at a rock concert, filled the room. Tears threatened my eyelids. I'd always loved that amp, had it for years. Suddenly I was too afraid to even look at it, let alone touch it. What a dilemma. Smartly, I put the guitar back in its case and shoved the case in the closet. Then I wept. That night, the DJ visited my dreams. I can't recall exactly what he said, but I woke up in a pool of sweaty sheets. Worse, my fingertips were encrusted with blood, and I was balding. My once golden hair was sprinkled across my moist pillow, like evidence. I knew I needed help, but there was no one to turn to. Having spent 10 years on the road, my only friends were my bandmates, and let's just say we didn't end our partnership amicably. Spending that much time with anyone, even your closest friends, can cause serious friction, even in the best of times. And I'm not close with my family. They never approved my musician lifestyle. I have many acquaintances, but only one true friend, Peter, and he's going through his own version of hell, a nasty divorce. So I didn't reach out. After my morning shower, I put on a fresh pair of Levi's and a plaid sweater. As I was leaving the bedroom, my amp started hissing. The red power light was flickering. When it spoke, I nearly had a heart attack. "Plug me in," the DJ said in a croaky voice. "You're not scared, are you?" The rational part of my mind insisted that nothing was wrong, that this was merely my overzealous imagination. Had to be, right? But that didn't explain the voice. Amps don't speak, especially when they're unplugged. I shoved the amp in the closet next to the guitar. For the remainder of the week, I avoided the electric guitar and returned to my trusty old acoustic, a Gibson J100. Life seemed to settle. The following weekend, longing to find myself a partner, I decided to hit up a local jam session. It had been over a year since I'd last performed. I needed this. Problem was, most jam sessions provided inadequate amplifiers, and tone is king. It's a guitarist thing. So despite my trepidation, I loaded my amp, guitar, and a tube screamer overdrive pedal into the van and drove downtown. The house band was fairly decent, weekend warriors at best, but nice enough fellas. That they knew who I was certainly boosted my confidence. I'd only done backing vocals in my previous band. Now I was to sing lead. Confidence was crucial. When they called me up, we blasted through a Georgia Satellites classic, followed by Tennessee Whiskey, always a crowd favorite. Although it was a meager-sized audience, I had them in the palm of my sweaty hands. My voice felt strong, and my amp sounded superb. Halfway through Tennessee Whiskey, I noticed a redhead wearing a tight Zeppelin t-shirt, giving me dirty eyeballs. She couldn't keep her gorgeous green eyes off me. I felt invincible, just like old times. With the 2 songs completed, the small but mighty crowd demanded an encore. I busted into Ring of Fire, and all hell broke loose. The drummer kicked off a steady train groove. The bass player locked in nicely. There was a keyboard player on stage providing the much-needed harmony. I played the trumpet bit on the guitar. We nailed the intro. Love, I sang in a throaty baritone, is a burnin' thing. The redhead started dancing, and it makes a fiery ring. As I leaned into the mic, eager to deliver the next line, I got zapped, electrocuted. I fell with a thud, cracking my head on the side of the stage. The mic stand went flying and slammed the keyboard player in the skull. He went down, too. Amidst the chaos, my amp started speaking. This is WDVL 666 on your earthly dial. Everybody stared, stupefied, as I lay sprawled across the stage, twitching. The band leader approached me cautiously. You all right, son? I tried speaking, but my lips felt like 2 balloons. Graciously, he helped me up. As my eyes adjusted, I noticed the redhead walking out of the bar, shaking her head. The remaining patrons chuckled, then returned to their drinks. With a troubled mind and scorched lips, I gathered my gear in disgrace. You're pitiful, Noah, the DJ pestered. All hail Lucifer, the Prince of Darkness, the Evil One, Lord of the Flies. The hair on my arm stood tall. My mouth was as dry as a musician's sense of humor. I studied the bar room. Was anyone else hearing this? Apparently not. Or if they did, they chose to ignore it. I drove home highly agitated. What the hell's wrong with my damned amplifier? I pouted. And why me? What did I do to deserve this? Not only was I miserable, I was petrified. I needed to get to the bottom of it, and fast, so I contacted a local luthier, a guitar repair person, for you non-musicians. When I told Steve, not his real name, what was happening, he turned ghost white. Heard of this happening once before. Steve said in a nasally voice. He ran a large hand through his thinning gray hair and paused. Paul Marino, he said thoughtfully, eyes cast afar. Poor old Paul is still in the mental hospital, or whatever it's called these days. Not allowed visitors, last I heard. Steve looked at my amp with suspicion. then smiled awkwardly. I was as tense as a $2 steak. Having just turned 31, I knew I was too young for a midlife crisis, but that's how it felt. And I was lonely. Playing guitar was my only outlet. I needed it, even if only on the weekends. Tell you what, Steve said, inspecting the amp. I'm sure it's nothing. Probably your patch cord. You have your cables on you? I did. Good, he said. Leave 'em with me. I'll have a look. Come back next week. I sighed. He turned the amp on and, using my cables, plugged a guitar into it. No radio station, no disreputable DJ. He strummed a G chord. It sounded as sweet as roses. Looks fine. Sounds good. Steve shrugged. It's probably nothing but strange karma. He winked. We shook hands, then I left. It was a rough week. I barely could concentrate at work, and I no longer felt comfortable at home. I slept on the couch, avoiding my bedroom like the plague. The following week, when I hadn't heard back from Steve, I stopped by his shop after work. The lights were off. The parking lot was deserted. I called him, and it went straight to his voicemail, which was full. An icy chill climbed up my spine. Steve worked late hours. He should be open. The following Friday, there was still no word from Steve. My anxiety skyrocketed. I could only imagine what my dreaded amp was doing, or saying to him. My life was in turmoil. I'd lost weight, and to my chagrin, I'd gone completely bald, seemingly overnight. None of that mattered. What mattered was that people were posting about Steve on social media, asking for information. Apparently he failed to show up for a band rehearsal, and he missed an important gig. His family and friends were worried sick. By now, I was completely freaked out. The cursed amp. What the devil was going on? A question came, one I could do without. What would the deranged DJ do next? My mind jumped to many conclusions, each more terrifying than the last. Was the devil out for revenge? Was he punishing me for quitting my band? He probably hates Christian country bands. Maybe I should play heavy metal. Surely the devil loves metal. Or perhaps I should pack up and move to Canada. He'd never find me up there. Too damn cold. I stayed put. My rational mind was having none of this. Surely this is a case of bad luck. Or as Steve put it, strange karma. Another week went by and still no news of Steve. It was like he'd vanished. Ultimately, I was forced to purchase a new guitar amp. Truth be told, I was kinda excited. Yeah, I was saddened about Steve. He'd helped me a lot back in the day, working on my road-worn gear, but perhaps a new amp was all that was required. Out with the old, in with the new, as they say. Don't judge. Once a musician, always a musician. I had to do something. Besides, it's not like I murdered Steve. All I did was bring him a glitchy amp. Repairing amps was his job, for Christ's sake. Thus, I bought a brand new Vox AC30, a classic. When I plugged it in, it sounded wicked good. No devil, no radio station, just a smooth, velvety tone. The amp soared. I cranked it to 11 and waited all weekend. It was a blast, although I'm sure the neighbors would disagree. Relieved yet anxious, I needed redemption. It was time. I had to return to the local jam session. Perhaps there was still a chance of impressing the redhead. Needing new material, I decided to take a stab at something more challenging. A popular Charlie Daniels song. Not an easy feat, let me tell ya. Playing the fiddle parts on guitar would require a heck of a lot of practice and dexterity. But the devil's in the details, as they say, so I woodshedded all week. I was extremely nervous. Bizarre amps, missing luthiers. Electrical shocks. If only I had something to soothe my worried mind. A fiery redhead, perhaps. Despite my trepidation, I practiced the Charlie Daniels song as though my life depended on it. And perhaps it did. Another week passed, still no Steve. Surely an omen. I was coming unglued, but sitting around feeling sorry for myself wasn't helping. So I returned to the local jam session, toting my brand new Vox AC30. The place was packed. The fiery redhead was there, sipping cocktails in the corner with her friends. The host looked at me peculiarly, but smiled nonetheless. I was terribly nervous about performing the Charlie Daniels song. What if the house band couldn't handle such a challenging piece? Maybe I should reconsider and choose a simpler song. When I was called up to perform, a few patrons giggled, including the redhead. Despite my shoddy nerves, I played exceptionally well. My guitar soared like an eagle. The Vox delivered what it promised, killer tone. The band was hot. The audience was receptive. After blazing through a Jimmy Reed song, Big Boss Man, I started to relax. Things were actually going my way. It was time to play the Charlie Daniels song. The drummer, a middle-aged Mexican man with a cop mustache and a hefty beer gut, looked uneasy. Nonetheless, he counted off. The devil went down to Georgia, and away we went. You gonna play that thing, boy, or stand there looking stupid? The DJ. His menacing voice soared through the amp speaker, clear as a bell. Because I'm in the mood for some fiddlin', Lord below, yes sir I am. His voice was as meaty as a porterhouse. Fear paralyzed me. My shaky hands could barely hold the guitar pick. I'd forgotten the words. I didn't know what to do. Fortunately, singing wasn't required. Apparently Satan knew all the words. Well, the devil went down to Georgia, he sang. He was looking for a soul to steal. He was in a bind 'cause he was way behind. And he was willing to make a deal when he came across this young man. I fainted. When I came to, the bar room had cleared out. The bartender glared at me with contempt. I felt like an imbecile, a total loser. I left immediately. In the confusion, I'd forgotten the amp. I considered returning for it, but was too embarrassed. So I stayed at home and wallowed in self-pity. I've thought long and hard about the decision. Maybe I should have gone back for it. Maybe not. Hard to say. Because what happened next still haunts my dreams. Later that night, in a burning ring of fire, the bar was set ablaze. Foul play is suspected. And still, no word from Steve. You ever notice something in your house that wasn't? A corner that feels colder, a shadow that bends wrong, maybe a door you swear didn't used to be there. Mine appeared on a Tuesday. I live in a 2-bedroom apartment, 1 bedroom, 1 office, always been that way. I work from home, no pets, no guests, just me. But when I walked past the hallway that afternoon, there it was. A door on the left wall. Same color, same handle. Perfectly normal. Only problem? That wall's never had a door. I stood frozen, just stared. I even took out my phone to check old pictures. Walls empty in every single one. So obviously I did the stupidest thing. I opened it. It was a room, small, empty, dustless, windowless. The air was warm, still. The floorboards were the same as the rest of the apartment, but newer, like freshly installed. The ceiling light flicked on automatically, humming softly. I stepped inside just for a second. When I stepped out again, it was night. I checked my phone. 3:42 a.m. I'd lost over 10 hours. I tried to convince myself I fell asleep, blacked out, whatever. But the next morning the room was still there, and something was in it. A chair. Not like one I own. This one was old, Victorian maybe. Ornate carvings, crimson velvet, worn down to threads and spots. And on the chair, a single Polaroid. It was of me standing in the room, but I never took that photo. I slammed the door shut, locked it, pushed a bookshelf in front of it. I didn't sleep. The next morning I pushed the shelf aside. The room had changed. Now there were 3 Polaroids. Me sitting, me looking up in confusion, and the third, me screaming. Over the next week the room grew, slowly by inches. A side table one day, a coat rack the next. Every day something was different. The light bulb began to flicker. The air smelled like rotting wood. The photos multiplied, but I never went in again. I started hearing things at night, shuffling, a soft, dragging noise, like something pacing in a circle. One night I heard humming, a lullaby I couldn't place. And then the photos started appearing outside the room, in my fridge, my coat pocket, my shoe. One was pinned to my pillow. Me, sleeping, shot from above. I called my landlord. I asked about previous tenants. He hesitated before saying, "You're in 3B, right?" "Yeah." He paused again. "There is no 3B. I thought he was messing with me, until I went outside. The building has no 3rd floor. I live on the 2nd floor, and the apartment above me is gone. It's just roof. I ran back inside. My hall was longer than I remembered. The door to the room was now the only door. My bedroom? Gone. Office? Gone. Just the door, and the chair, and the photos. Hundreds now. Thousands maybe. Piled on the floor, pinned to the walls, floating in the air. All of me. Dozens of angles. All expressions. Some I don't remember making. Some I know I never made. Some photos are of me sleeping in places I've never been. One shows me with my eyes stitched shut. One shows me hanging from the ceiling. One shows me holding a camera, smiling. And now there's a mirror. It wasn't there before. And in that mirror, I just saw myself stand up from the chair. But I haven't moved. I don't think I ever left the room. I think it's been watching me pretend to. I think it's learning. I think it's almost ready to take my place. So if you ever notice a new door in your house, don't open it. Please. Don't let it out. I want to tell you a story. I really don't care if you believe me. I know that what I'm about to say might sound frightening, but please, don't be frightened. Something wonderful has happened to me, and if you're reading this, I think it could happen to you too. Let me tell you about a miracle. It was about a month ago that my grandfather passed on due to complications from his stroke late last year. He and I were very close, and after his stroke, I had taken care of my grandmother and him the best I could while still making my way through university. The day of the funeral service, it rained like hell. The ground of the tiny cemetery on the corner of Elk and Monroe turned to mush underfoot, and a few unfortunate folks got mud all over their funeral blacks. The service had been incredibly hard for me, and because I had a lot of difficulty crying around my family and friends, I decided to stay back from the burial service so I could get a couple minutes to honestly grieve. That's when I saw him. The cemetery's caretaker stood out in the pouring rain looking underdressed and soaked to the bone. He stood a respectful distance away from the service, clearly not wanting attention, but I could tell he was shivering, so I walked over with my black umbrella to give him some relief. When I got closer, the first thing I noticed was that he was young. Under his thick, blonde beard, he couldn't have been more than a year or two older than me. The second thing I noticed was an odor that hung around him, thick and cool. It wasn't a terrible smell, more that he smelled like wet, black earth, even more so than the whole world seemed to smell of it in the rain, and a sort of cinnamony scent I couldn't quite place. "That's very kind of you, sir," he said in a surprisingly soft voice. "It's just that you looked cold," I stammered out, slightly off balance from the age, the smell, and now the voice. The caretaker gestured out to the mass of black umbrellas and solemn faces. "Who was he to you?" he asked in that soft, almost cautious voice. "My grandfather. I loved him dearly," I said, the second half of the sentence falling lame even to my own ears. "You and all those people out there," he gestured with a long-nailed hand out to my friends and family. "I've worked this plot for a long time, seen all sorts go into the earth. You can always tell when it's a well-loved one, something in the faces of the mourners. I can't quite explain, but it's there." He picked each word carefully, like an artist selecting just the right brush. As he spoke, I caught a whiff of his breath, and the smell that hung around him hit me even harder, this time less pleasant, and with an underlying rank sweetness. "How long have you worked here?" I inquired, eager to change the subject as my roiling emotions threatened to bubble over again. "A good long while now. I don't bother keeping track. The work's rewarding, and this is a good place. A calm and quiet place." His face spoke of a life that hadn't always been full of calm and quiet places. I couldn't disagree with him, though. Despite the rain, or maybe even because of the cemetery had almost an ethereal stillness, and looking over the well-cleaned headstones, I could see how this place could be someone's haven, if not mine. We made a sort of gentle conversation that slowly spun out into silence. Then we stood for a while, listening to the rain patter on the fabric of the umbrella we shared, and watching the service from afar. It wasn't until just before I was about to excuse myself to return to the last minute of the service that he spoke again. "I don't think most people would have shared their umbrella," he mused without looking away from the mourners and meeting my eyes. "Why's that?" I asked, startled out of my thoughts. "They're uncomfortable with people like me, people who are proximate to death and decay. Thank you for being different, and thank you for the conversation. I think it's time you get back to your grandfather. They're about to begin the lowering." He offered one of his long-nailed hands. I took it with only the slightest hesitation. His grip was strong, painfully so. As he squeezed my hand, he leaned in, breath stinking of the grave, he said, "Good deeds are rewarded, my friend. Run along now." The biting grip disappeared as quick as it came on, and I did my best to politely excuse myself without appearing shaken. I didn't notice until later, but those long, snaggled fingernails had bitten into the meat of my right hand in 2 places, forming a shallow V-shaped cut. There was a small reception after at my grandparents' house. We told stories about my grandfather, some of which I had never heard until then. It felt like once the ritual of viewing and funeral and burial were complete, my grandfather had somehow become a real person again, if that makes any sense. I felt closer to him than I had when I was helping to carry the casket. The house seemed to hold something of his presence that his cold body couldn't match. I never expected a funeral to have snacks, but the reception had tons of food, none of which I had much of an appetite for. Eventually, I excused myself. I was exhausted and I had to get ready for school the next day. As I left, my grandmother insisted I take some of my grandfather's brandy with me. She said she wouldn't drink it anyway, and that brandy is good for the constitution. When I asked her why that was important, she said with simple finality, "You just look a bit pale, that's all." That night, I dreamed of the cemetery on the corner of Elk and Monroe. I dreamed of the silent headstones at night, how the place would look lit only by the street lights spilling over the high wall that surrounded it. I dreamed that I was late to my grandfather's funeral, that I was dressed in the blacks and my dress shoes were getting stuck in the sucking, grasping mud, and when I finally made it to the grave, everybody was long gone. I had something that I meant to give my grandfather before he was buried, a little silver fork, and so I began to dig with my hands into the filled grave so that I could give him this one last thing, and he could give me something that I wanted in return. As I dug into the soaked earth, the smell of the grave filled my nose and my stomach bubbled and stirred uncomfortably. I excavated the way down, silver fork held in my teeth before my nails scratched on the lid of the coffin. Suddenly the flash of lamplight came over me and I woke up in a feverish sweat, my mouth full of a gungy, unclean, sick taste. My bones ached, and I knew immediately that I would not be making it to class today. I lay a while in my sticky, damp sheets. The dream was still pressed into the forefront of my consciousness. The pure illogic of it bemused me. My fevered brain raked over the details of the dream. Only as I pulled my mind away from the empty, sodden cemetery on the corner of Elk and Monroe, did I realize just how hungry I was. In all the events of yesterday, I had completely forgotten to eat. I hadn't had any appetite at the reception, and once I had gone, I had been too preoccupied by my grief and preparations for school. When I awoke, fevered as I was starving. I peeled myself out of my sheets and walked tenderly through my apartment. I filled a glass with water and sucked it down to try to soothe my aching head. It did no good. When I opened my refrigerator, a pungent cacophony of odors hit me in waves. I slammed the fridge door shut before the smell made me sick. Has something gone off in there? I wondered to myself. The worst part was that the horrible smell hadn't allayed my hunger for more than a few seconds. I grabbed a piece of bread and started chewing it, but the texture suddenly felt all wrong, and I hadn't gotten more than bite down when I had to run to my sink to retch. Bent over the sink, quivering with tremors and smelling my own thin vomit, I realized that maybe the best thing I could do for myself was go back to bed. After I sent off a few short emails to my professors explaining that I was ill, I decided I would shower off the tacky sweat residue that clung to my skin. As I reached for my soap in the shower, I noticed something strange on my hand. At first I thought it was an ink stain, but when I inspected the V-shaped mark on the bottom of my right hand, I realized that two small cuts the caretaker's fingernails had made had scabbed over completely black. I was immediately worried that the cut had become infected or something, but there was no inflammation, and when I prodded it gently, it didn't sting any more than your typical scab. After I finished my shower, I opted to dab some polysporin on and around it and go back to my bed. I took a long while getting back to sleep between the fever and the stomach cramping hunger, but when I did, my dreams were strange again. I dreamed of family dinners and the cemetery. I dreamed of the caretaker with his shovel. I dreamed of him filling graves and emptying them. I dreamed about the sound a shovel makes when it hits the roof of a casket, like the sound of a pirate striking buried treasure. I dreamed of smelling that damp dirt and cinnamon smell, and when I woke late in the evening, my fever had grown far worse and my mouth was watering. I was getting worse. I was a pale and shaking mess, completely unable to keep a bite of solid food down. When I tried a sip of my grandfather's brandy, I nearly spat it out. A rancid flavor had surpassed even the burn of alcohol in it. I resolved to drink only water until this flu or fever had passed, and I shivered out the rest of the evening on my couch trying to distract myself from the vicious combination of malaise and hunger. I dazed intermittently but always started awake from strange dreams full of grave dirt. 48 hours after my grandfather's funeral, I decided I was going to go to the emergency room. The fever was bad. The hunger was worse. I had wondered if I was well enough to drive, but ultimately decided that if this was contagious, it would be best for everyone if I tried to avoid exposing anyone. By the time I had walked out to my car, my heart was racing with effort and a cloud of lightheadedness hung over me. I sat in my car for a full 8 minutes before I felt clear-headed enough to start it. Even as I started to drive, I wondered if I was making a terrible mistake in trying to drive. My attention kept wandering, and I would lose seconds at a time, realizing I had run a yellow light or missed a turn. My eyes kept straying to brightly lit fast food signs, but I knew as soon as the greasy paper bag was passed over to me, I wouldn't be able to take a single bite. I rolled down my window to get some cool air on my face. That's when I realized where I was. The smell washed over me, and I felt my stomach growl maddeningly. It took a moment to identify. It was rich and cool, a simultaneously wet and dry odor. It was herby with an earthy note and the slightest hint of fruitiness. I had visions of sweet, cool fruits being pulled from rich, damp earth. My focus drifted in the tantalizing presence of this smell until the squawk of a car horn behind me snapped me out of my daze. The light at the intersection of Elk and Simons had changed to green, and I had been idling in front of it for who knows how long. I goosed the gas pedal, eyes scanning for the source of the delicious smell when I saw it. The next intersection was Elk and Monroe. The cemetery gate on the corner stood wide open, flanked by stone angels, and as I drove toward it, the sensations of smell and hunger threatened to overwhelm me, matched only by my internal horror. How could it be? How could it smell so right? There was nothing for me there, only the headstones, the dirt, and deep within the earth, gently moldering, fermenting, the many corpses with their pale flesh. I pulled away from the thought like it was a fat black spider discovered walking over my pillow. It was the fever. It's making me delirious, I reasoned to myself. I immediately turned off the street that led to the cemetery gates and, in a daze, drove halfway home before I remembered I had planned to go to the hospital. I was so desperate to get distance away from those gates and that horrid, wonderful smell that I couldn't even bring myself to turn back. Fatigue was washing over me in dark waves, and if not for the bone-deep horror that gripped me, I might have fallen asleep at the wheel. When I got back to my apartment, I pulled into my stall at a steep angle and stumbled to the elevator, resting my burning head against the cool metal of the elevator door frame as I waited for its arrival. I'll call 911 tomorrow if I'm not better, I bargained with myself. When I got into my apartment, fever had turned to chills and I hid under the sheets, body quaking and mind reeling. Even as I lay there, horror mingled with wanting into a primordial stew of feeling. Red and black fantasies played at the edge of my brain before swallowing me whole as I drifted off to uneasy sleep. In those dreams, I was a farmer in a field of dark soil and pale stones. I moved confidently with hoe and shovel, digging and planting deep within the earth. I pulled a strange and lovely crop from the ground and ate it under the stars. I was content. I basked in the night's breeze and drew in the odor of the land and my harvest moldering below its surface, and I was so at peace. But it was only a dream. I awoke. The fever had broken. The hunger had grown. When my eyes snapped open in the night-black room, I knew where my medicine was. The world had shrunk into a single point of rough need, and I rose from the chill sheets with a blank-minded purpose. Time slipped. I was in the car. The blue dashboard clock read 2:55. I watched the street lamps float past my car, and I rolled down my windows. I breathed deeply of the night air, and I caught the faintest hint of it in the wind. Time slipped. The car had stopped. I had pulled into the parking lot. Behind me, the intersection lights cast a pale green hue over the scene. The smell was so thick you could cut it with a knife. The stone angels seemed to beckon me in with outstretched hands. The gate was open, even though the sign said it was closed. I took the first step on the gravel path. Time slipped. I was on my knees, a headstone out in front of me. I must have looked from afar like some midnight mourner, but I hadn't even read the name. I stared down into the dirt and saw I had already begun ripping up the sod, revealing the pregnant soil beneath. Was there one last ounce of hesitation in me? No. I don't think there was. I could smell her waiting for me down there, 6 feet of earth, and it still filled my nose like honey. I began to dig with my hands, desperately scrabbling at the earth, pull out great hunks of black earth, dirt forcing itself under my nails, small rocks cutting my palms. I didn't care. I began to weep as I realized I couldn't possibly do this without a shovel or some tool. That's when the light washed over me and my heart froze. It was him. The caretaker stood with an ancient hurricane lantern in hand, its light casting stark shadows over his face. In this light he looked far older than I remembered. I had frozen, dirt in both hands at the sight of him. I opened my mouth to say something, and all that came out were thick rivulets of drool. My mind raced. The smell drove me to dig. My brain drove me to run. I had almost decided on trying to bludgeon the caretaker and make a run for it when he spoke in that soft voice. "You poor boy. You must be starving." His eyes were solemn as he looked at me. Could it have been empathy? I can explain," I started. No idea what I was going to say. Overwhelmed completely. "You don't have to. Just come with me. Let's set you right," he said. There was perhaps the faintest hint of a smile on his face then. Perhaps it was just a trick of the guttering lamplight. I let the dirt fall from my blackened hands and rose from my knee-deep hole in the earth. "What's happening to me?" I asked. The shame ran back into me like a flood, and I began to blubber again, spit and snot mingling around my mouth. There, my boy." The caretaker closed the distance between us and held me in his arms for a minute before he looked me in the eyes with utter seriousness. "Something wonderful, I promise. You'll be feeling right as rain if you just walk with me now. You've come a very long way, but you only have a few more steps." He began to lead me gently down the path. Gravel crunched underfoot and was the only sound in the silence of the cemetery. I saw that we were coming to the caretaker's workshop. It was a small white building, almost a church in miniature. From within, unsteady candlelight burned. We entered to the smell of motor oil and sawdust, and above it all, the heavenly odor of the rotted dead. When we came to the workshop's back room, the table was already set. Fine china and small silver forks and wicked sharp knives, set for 2. The centerpiece of the wide table was a long oak coffin, half rotted away, Candles had been placed at the corners of the coffin, and the caretaker bade me sit at one of the set places. Reaching into his coat pocket, he brought out a crowded keychain and carefully selected one. He slid it into the lock, and as I heard the click of it coming open, it was all I could do not to leap from my chair and push him aside as the smell of tantalizing rot seemed to double in the room. He spoke some words then. Some I understood and some that I did not. It was a benediction of sorts, a thanksgiving. Blessed is the carrion, and blessed is he who tasteth the graveyard's fruit. We thank the ground for yielding her gifts to us. We thank the stars for sheltering us. We thank the empty vessel for remembering life, that it may be passed to us. Blessed are we by dark earth and black heavens, that we shall feast tonight. He spoke it with whispered ritual cadence. Then the small silver knife was in his hands, and he was cutting. I watched as he deftly split rotted flesh from the corpse of a woman. The meat was dry in places, wet in others. It was speckled with pale purples and reds. He started with the cheek. He separated it with a few quick strokes, revealing pale jaw and teeth underneath, and then he set it on my plate. Take, eat, live. The 3 words were in the same ritual cadence, and as soon as he spoke, I descended on the meat with the desperation of a drowning man. It was like nothing I had ever tasted. Black, greasy, mealy, and yet sweeter than honeydew. More intoxicating than wine. It satisfied the indescribable need that bound itself in tight coils throughout my body. It was pure relief. The caretaker placed slice after slice of the prime cuts on my plate, and my aching, screaming hunger was finally answered. When I had eaten my fill, the caretaker set a few pieces on his own plate, and then closed and locked the coffin lid. As I sat in a warm haze of emotion and satiation, he broke the silence. He spoke to me of many things that long and deep night. I will not tell you most of it. He spoke to me of dark earth, old countries, and ancient laws. He told me of his life long and sweet, how he had worked plots like these since he was an apprentice under a master far older than he was even now. That night he showed me the grandness of what I had become, the beauty and the comfort of it. He offered me a job. He offered me a life. When I asked him why choose me, his answer was simple. When we met, I told you that good deeds should be rewarded, yes? I have no greater gift for you than this. He gestured at the dining ware and the candles burning low. I am in need of an apprentice besides. I chose you because nobody had shared an umbrella with me in my long years of this work. Few have ever shared more than a couple terse words with me. I scrub the headstones clean, keep the plots free of weeds. In my work I have done nothing but bring closure and comfort, and I am made a pariah for it. I have never done harm to the living, have never taken anything that wasn't willingly surrendered to the earth. I have lived a graceful but lonely life since I came to this country, and I want to share the goodness of it with somebody. It seemed right that it was you. It did seem right. I've been working at the cemetery on the corner of Elk and Monroe for 3 months now. I've dropped out of university. I'm just too busy. The hours are good. The company is excellent. 6 days a week in the shade of the cemetery, where the air is sweet and cool. Looking back, I do not know what I was afraid of. The illness is already a distant memory, and the reward was more than enough. As for the appetites, the caretaker is right. We don't take anything that wasn't given to our cemetery. We serve in the moment of people's mourning, and are paid our wages under the sheltering night sky. The caretaker has been very pleased with my work. Even with the 2 of us, we're just so busy. I have no idea how he managed it alone for so long. The dead keep coming in the gates, carried on the shoulders of their loved ones, and we plant them deep in our soil to ripen. I think he'll be hiring again soon. We just need to find the right fit. Stop by someday if you're in the area. We're on the corner of Elk and Monroe. We'd love to say hello and shake your hand. Hello, everyone. Never thought I would do this, but I need to talk. I need someone to know what I know, even if they won't believe me. I'm a normal guy just like everyone else. My life is very ordinary. Work, then home, maybe a bit too much solitude. The only thing that gives me a sense of comfort or escape from this monotony is the sky. Ever since I was a child, I've loved looking at the stars. It's a strange feeling, looking at things millions of light years away. Things our ancestors saw, and perhaps generations long after us will see. It makes you feel incredibly small, but also part of something immensely larger. About a year ago, I decided to take this interest to another level. I saved up and bought a telescope. Not exactly professional grade, but a decent one. It magnifies the view and lets me see more details on the moon, nearby planets, and sometimes distant star clusters, or faint nebulae if the sky is clear. Most nights I go up to our building's rooftop, as far away from the street noise and city lights as I can manage. I sit there for hours in the quiet of the night, the sound of the cool breeze, just focused on the telescope's eyepiece. The whole world disappears, leaves only me and the tiny point of light I'm observing. Many nights passed in the same routine. I'd align the telescope to a specific region of the sky and just contemplate. Sometimes I'd look at Jupiter and its faint rings, other times at Mars with its distinct red hue, and often I'd just get lost in the endless sea of stars. I used to feel a strange peace, a peace I couldn't find anywhere else. Until one night, about 2 months ago. That night changed everything. I was on the rooftop as usual. The weather was nice, the sky relatively clear. I had an eyepiece attached that gave me a slightly wider field of view, wanting to scan an area dense with stars. As I slowly moved the telescope, I noticed something odd. A point of light, like an ordinary star, but it was stationary. At first I thought maybe my hand had shaken, or perhaps it was just a very distant aircraft. I focused harder. No, not an airplane. Airplanes follow straight or gently curved paths, and they have blinking lights. This was a steady point of light, just like a star, but it was moving. And it wasn't moving like the satellites we sometimes see crossing the sky at a constant speed in a straight line. No, this thing was moving in a way that was impossible. It was making sharp, acute angles, stopping abruptly, then shooting off in another direction at high speed, only to slow again and trace something like a strange geometric shape. Initially, I thought I might be hallucinating. Maybe my eyes were strained from focusing too long. I pulled my eye away from the eyepiece, looked up at the sky directly. Of course, I saw nothing but the familiar fixed stars. I returned to the telescope, aimed it at the same region. There it was. Still there. Still moving in that same crazy manner. My heart started beating faster. What was this? A spy satellite? But what kind of satellite performs these kinds of aerobatics? A drone? What drone could reach that altitude and appear like a star? My mind raced, searching for any logical explanation, anything to hold on to. I found nothing. I kept tracking it with my eye in the telescope for about an hour. It was tracing bizarre shapes in a small patch of the sky, complex patterns, like intersecting lines, curves, and sharp angles. Then suddenly it would vanish, or move so fast I'd lose it. I came down from the rooftop feeling a mixture of shock, anxiety, and intense curiosity. I didn't know what I had just seen. I spent that whole night thinking, could it be a rare optical phenomena, a specific light reflection, a problem with the telescope itself? But the telescope worked perfectly fine with all the other stars and planets. And this phenomena was very specific, localized to that single point. The next day, I went up to the rooftop a bit earlier, before the time I'd seen the phenomena. I was tense, expectant, same area of the sky, same telescope settings. And indeed, at roughly the same time it appeared again, the same point of light, the same impossible movements. This time I was more focused. I tried to follow its path meticulously. It was tracing the exact same shapes I'd seen the night before. Not similar shapes, no, precisely the same ones. The same angles, the same pauses, the same speeds. This is where it went beyond coincidence or natural phenomena, or even a conventional satellite. Something tracing the same complex pattern every night, in the same spot, at the same time. This wasn't natural. This was intentional. A faint sense of dread started creeping into me. The idea of aliens or UFOs had always been just science fiction and movies to me. I never seriously considered it, but what I was seeing had no earthly explanation I could logically arrive at. If it wasn't aliens in a craft, then what? The third night, I went up armed with a notebook and pen. I started observing the point as it moved, trying my best to sketch the path it was taking. It was incredibly difficult. The movement was fast, the shapes complex, and my hand wasn't steady enough. But I was determined. I drew jagged lines, dots, angles, trying to capture any part of the pattern. Every night I went up and drew. Every night, the same movements repeated with the same meticulous precision. I began comparing the drawings from different nights. The same sequence, the same strange geometric figures. It wasn't just movement anymore. It felt more like a passage being written across the sky. But a message from whom, and why, and what did it mean? The first week passed like this. I became obsessed. My work started to suffer. My sleep dwindled. During the day, I'd think about what I saw at night. And at night, I was perched on the rooftop, fixated on that moving point of light. I started feeling utterly alone in the world, holding a secret nobody knew, and nobody would likely believe if I told them. I considered telling a friend once. We were sitting in a cafe, and I was very hesitant. Finally, I vaguely hinted that I was seeing strange things in the sky with my telescope. He looked at me and said, "Man, you must be seeing things. Maybe it's just a plane or a satellite, and you're making a big deal out of it." I tried to explain that the movement wasn't normal, that it repeated, but he just laughed and said, "All right, man, next time film it and show us." The idea of filming it had occurred to me, of course. I tried recording with my phone camera through the telescope eyepiece, but the image came out extremely shaky and unclear, and the point of light was so small it barely showed up as a pixel or two moving erratically in the video. There was no solid physical proof I could present. I went back to the notebook and pen. Every night, I added a new piece to the drawing, like assembling a large, complex puzzle. I started noticing that these shapes weren't just random lines. There was repetition, a certain symmetry, like a strange visual language. I would stare at these drawings for hours, trying to understand them. Was it a map, chemical symbols, the design for some machine? Time passed and I still didn't understand anything. The feeling of helplessness grew. I was witnessing something happening right before my eyes every night, something that could potentially be the most important discovery in human history, and I couldn't comprehend it or report it to anyone convincingly. The fear began to evolve. It wasn't just fear of the unknown anymore. It became fear of what this message might actually be saying. If it was a message, who was sending it with such power that it barely appeared as a moving star? And what level of importance or danger would warrant such an effort? I started searching online for anything similar. Amateur astronomy forums, conspiracy theory websites, anything. I found no description matching what I was seeing. Everything was either mundane sightings of satellites or planes, or clearly fabricated videos. What I was seeing was different. It was real, persistent, and terrifyingly organized. Over time, the drawing in my notebook started to take shape. I now had a complete sequence of the movements, the points made over about an hour and a half each night. An incredibly complex drawing, filled with minute details. I'd looked at it, feeling like the key was right in front of me, but I couldn't find the door. One night, I was looking at the drawing, comparing it to the previous nights to ensure accuracy. I noticed something. In a specific part of the drawing, there seemed to be a certain ratio that repeated between the lengths of particular lines and specific angles. A mathematical ratio. Something like the golden ratio, perhaps, but much more complex. I thought to myself, wait a minute, what if these aren't visual symbols in the traditional sense? What if they're equations? What if it's the language of mathematics? They call mathematics the language of the universe. Maybe whoever is sending this message knows that the only way to communicate with any other civilization, regardless of their language or form, is through mathematical constants and logics. The idea sent a shiver down my spine. If this was math, then I needed someone who understood highly complex mathematics to decipher it. My education is average. My highest level of math was in high school, but this idea opened a new door. I began focusing on the drawing from a mathematical perspective, looking for numerical patterns, for known constants like pi or Euler's number. It was like trying to crack an impossible code. I spent days and nights trying to apply the simple math I knew, searching online for advanced mathematical concepts that might relate to these shapes. Chaos theory, fractal geometry, things I'd never heard of before. I felt like a blind person feeling their way through a dark maze. Every time I felt I was getting close to something, I'd hit a dead end. But I didn't give up. The feeling that the answer was near, that this message had meaning, was stronger than any frustration. To avoid suspicion or questions about the source of these shapes, I started using a tactic. I joined specialized math forums online, presenting small fragments of the drawing as abstract mathematical problems, or geometric puzzles. I was trying to solve as a hobby. I framed them in a context completely removed from astronomy or anything unusual. The reactions were mixed. Many people said they were just meaningless scribbles with no clear mathematical significance. Others tried to find patterns but arrived at illogical conclusions. However, a small minority, likely academics or people deeply versed in pure mathematics, were intrigued by the complexity and symmetry in these shapes. They began discussing a hypothesis, talking about the possibility that they represented a specific type of complex mathematical function, or an unconventional mathematical system. I followed these discussions eagerly, gathering any information, any thread that might lead me somewhere. I started understanding new terminology, learning about branches of mathematics I didn't know existed, and I began applying these ideas to the complete drawing I possessed. Slowly, gradually, the picture began to clear. It wasn't just a single equation. It was a series of interconnected mathematical equations and concepts, layered on top of each other. Each part of the drawing represented a variable, a constant, or a specific calculation. It was a purely mathematical language, completely abstract, devoid of any form of spoken or written language we knew. I spent several more weeks on the painstaking work, connecting the parts, trying to find the logic governing the sequence. It felt like solving the hardest equation of my life. And the closer I got to the solution, the more the fear inside me grew, because I started sensing the nature of the message. It wasn't a message of welcome, nor a map to a cosmic treasure, nor the design of a devastating weapon. It carried a sense of urgency and of pain. Until I reached the crucial moment, after long nights of sleeplessness, concentration, and calculations, aided by online tools and the discussions on the specialized forums I interacted with very cautiously, I managed to piece it all together. I was able to translate this mathematical message into a concept that we humans could grasp. The result was simpler and more horrifying than anything I could have possibly imagined. The message wasn't coming from a spacecraft orbiting this star, nor from a civilization living on a planet orbiting it. The message was coming from the star itself. I don't understand how, and I don't know if this is scientifically possible or not. Can stars possess consciousness? Can they be living beings in a way completely different from our understanding of life? I don't know, and that's not the important part right now. What matters is the contents of the message. All those complex geometric shapes and impossible movements, when translated from the abstract, universal language of mathematics, conveyed one simple, terrifying meaning, a meaning understandable to any living being anywhere in the universe, that might have reached a certain level of understanding of the fundamental laws of physics and mathematics. The equations described a specific physical state, a state of rapid, unexpected internal collapse, a state of imminent stellar death. And the final message? The culmination of all these movements was the mathematical equivalent of a simple phrase composed of two core concepts. Help request, imminent end/death, or simply in human terms, help us. We are dying. I sat there staring at the notebook, at the final equation frozen in place, unable to move, unable to think. The coldness I felt in that moment wasn't from the rooftop air. It came from the depths of the cosmos itself. A dying star, a conscious star, or at least one capable of communication somehow, sending a distress call across the vast expanse of space. A plea written in the language of mathematics so that anyone might understand it. And that someone was me. An ordinary young man sitting on a rooftop in a distant country, with a modest telescope. I was the one who cracked the code. I was the one who heard the scream. A scream that had been traveling for how many light years to reach here? Tens? Hundreds? Thousands? Millions? Where exactly is this star? Is it even still there? Or is this just an echo of a voice that died long, long ago? And what could I possibly do? Who am I to help a dying star? What help could I offer? Even if I knew its exact location? Even if I notified every space agency in the world? What would they do? Send a spaceship that would take millions of years to arrive? And if it arrived, what could it possibly do? The sense of absolute helplessness was crushing. The feeling of cosmic loneliness became deeper, more terrifying. We aren't just small in this universe. We are also frighteningly powerless. We hear the cries for help from our cosmic neighbors. and we can do absolutely nothing. That night, after deciphering the code, I went back to the rooftop. I pointed the telescope at the same spot. The point of light was still there, still tracing the same complex geometric shapes in the cold silence of space, still sending the same desperate message. Help us. We are dying. This time, I wasn't looking at it with curiosity or fear of the unknown. I was looking at it with profound sadness and a terrible sense of guilt. I knew, I understood, and I could do nothing. The sky where I used to find peace and escape had transformed for me into a vast graveyard filled with stars dying in silence, or screaming pleas for help that no one hears, or those who hear cannot answer. Every night now I go up to the rooftop, not to enjoy the stars, but because I honestly don't know why. Maybe to bear witness, maybe so that this scream doesn't just echo into the void completely alone. I sit and watch this point as it draws its message of death, knowing that a real star, a massive entity perhaps the size of our sun or larger, is collapsing and crying for help somewhere far away in the darkness. The biggest problem is that a realization like this changes everything. How can I go back to living my ordinary life knowing what I know? How can I care about trivial problems of work, money, and relationships when I know that beings the size of stars are pleading for help in the universe around us? I still go up to the rooftop every night, and the point of light still traces the same pattern, the same equation, the same scream. Help us. We are dying. And I don't know what to do, and I don't know if there's anyone else, anywhere else in this universe, seeing the same message and feeling the same helplessness that I feel right now. Just the thought that this message might be traced across the skies of other planets, before the eyes of other beings, each one standing alone, as helpless as I am. That thought makes me want to scream, but I hold it in, and I just keep watching in silence. Maybe that's all I can do. I don't think I'm me. I know that sounds strange, and yeah, if I heard someone else say it, I'd probably tell them to see a psychiatrist. But it's true. I would never wear a striped sweater, and definitely not on a random day in July. I don't even own striped sweaters. Yet there I was in a photo inside a photo album my best friend's mom was showing me, grinning in a red and blue striped knit like it belonged on me. And that wasn't the only strange thing. Earlier this week I came home from a month-long work trip. I was exhausted, dragging my suitcase through the door when my girlfriend greeted me. "Hey baby, I made your favorite meal. Eat it before it gets cold. I'm gonna go run a bath for us." Amy called over her shoulder. "Chicken parmesan." I didn't think much of it at the time. I was tired, hungry, and honestly touched by the gesture. I sat down and inhaled the food without hesitation. It was good. Really good. Too good. Halfway through rinsing my plate, it hit me. I don't even like chicken. I never have. I haven't eaten it since I was a kid. The texture makes my skin crawl. So why the hell did I eat an entire plate of it without even noticing? I shook it off. Jet lag, maybe. Or maybe I was just being dramatic. I got in the shower with Amy, didn't say anything, and we went to bed. The next morning, I was getting ready for work when Amy tossed me my keys and kissed me goodbye. I caught them midair and headed downstairs. Halfway, I felt them in my hand. Something was off. The grooves, the weight, they weren't mine. I looked down. Honda keys. I rushed back up the stairs. "Whose keys are these?" I asked, trying not to sound as shaken as I felt. Amy looked up from her coffee, brow furrowing. "What?" "These keys, Amy. They're not mine. I drive a Toyota. So, whose are these? Don't play dumb. She blinked. Honey, are you feeling okay? Those are your keys, stupid, she said with a soft laugh. No, they're not. My voice dropped cold. Without saying a word, Amy disappeared into the hallway, then returned holding a framed picture. That's you, she said, handing it to me. In the photo, I was standing next to a shiny new Honda Civic at a dealership. Huge smile. Handshake with the salesman, wearing, of course, a striped sweater. That was 6 months ago, babe. When I surprised you with the car. Do you seriously not remember? I opened my mouth, but nothing came out. That was me. My face, my grin, my stance. But it felt like I was looking at a stranger with my skin. I hurried into the bedroom, pulled open the closet, and froze. Dozens of sweaters. Striped, patterned, holiday-themed. My entire wardrobe looked like an ugly sweater convention. Amy followed me in, concern all over her face. Jamie, are you okay? You're starting to worry me. I'm fine, I lied. Just didn't sleep well, I said, even though I slept like a baby. I kissed her on the cheek and left for work. Outside, the Civic sat gleaming in the driveway. It looked familiar now. I got in. It smelled like me. Air fresheners, black tree scent, LED lights under the dash. Everything clean and organized. Exactly as I would have it. But it still felt wrong. Like I was stepping into someone else's life who just happened to be me. I arrived at the office late, feeling hazy. As I settled into my usual desk, a voice interrupted me. Jamie, you're at my desk, said Andrew, my annoying coworker. I looked up. What? No, I've always sat here. Just because I've been gone for a while doesn't mean you can steal my desk, Mountain Drew. Mountain Drew? Seriously? He muttered, pushing up his glasses. We had a bit of back and forth, and 10 minutes later I was in HR. Do you know what your position is here? The woman behind the desk asked. Of course, I said. I'm in charge of the Orbis project. And what does that entail? She asked, typing something. I opened my mouth, closed it, then opened it again. I attend meetings, organize. Wait, I blinked. What is the relevance of this question? I deflected. Well, she said, swiveling her monitor slightly. You're in the wrong department. Wrong floor, actually. And according to your file, you haven't been assigned to the Orbis project. That doesn't launch for another 2 months. You were moved to data processing last month after your last incident. My stomach dropped. What incident? She scrolled through my record with a practiced sigh. The one where you were caught dumping unmarked liquid into coworkers. Lunches in the break room. Honestly, you're lucky you weren't fired. I sat frozen in the chair, every nerve in my body screaming. What the hell is happening to me? The words slipped out before I could stop myself. Excuse me? She asked. My face turned slightly red. I'm sorry, I'm just having a hard time readjusting after the work trip. Okay, Mr. Jamie, why don't you just go on ahead back to your proper work area and try to stay out of trouble, please. The paperwork isn't easy on these old fingers, you know. Yes, of course. Thank you, I said as I quickly and quietly whisked away back into the building. After asking around a bit, I finally made it to my actual desk. Everyone on that floor acted as if I belonged there. I got a quick rundown of my tasks and got right into it. Trying not to think about all the bizarre things that happened, I decided to put it out of my mind and focus solely on work. About 30 minutes before I had to clock out, I decided to go through my emails. I didn't see anything out of the ordinary. I checked my drafts and saw my last draft dated on the day I went on to the work trip. Subject, Orbis. Sweet red. It's not me. Take the call. It made no sense, but I didn't know what to make of it, so I just went back to work. Besides that first day back, everything else seemed to be running smoothly. I got through the week without any more hiccups. I didn't mention my apprehension to Amy because she is such a worrywart. That was until today. I had planned to visit my best friend's family for a weekend barbecue, kind of an unofficial celebration for his niece's upcoming graduation. I got there relatively early. Honestly, I was looking forward to it. I needed something familiar, but if I thought that today would bring me peace, I was wrong. The grill was already going when I got there. The scent of charcoal and barbecue sauce hit me before I even stepped out of the car. Kids were running around the yard with water guns, and someone had queued up an early 2000s playlist on a Bluetooth speaker. It felt right. I needed this. Familiar faces. I spotted Marcus, my best friend since middle school, near the back porch, beer in hand, laughing with his cousin. He lit up when he saw me. "Jamie, look who finally decided to show up," he said, pulling me into a quick hug. "Hey man, sorry I'm early. Didn't want to miss the ribs this time." "Smart move," he chuckled. "You're not still vegetarian, are you?" That made me pause. "I was never vegetarian," I said, half laughing. He blinked, then shrugged. "Oh, right, yeah." The moment passed, but something about it lingered. I grabbed a plate, made small talk, accepted a drink. For the first time all week, I felt like myself again, until I wandered inside to use the bathroom. On the hallway wall, right before the guest bathroom, was a photo collage I'd seen a dozen times before. I'd even helped Marcus's mom hang it last year, but this time something was off. At the center of the collage, surrounded by prom photos and school portraits, was a framed picture of me and Marcus at the lake house. I remember that trip, or at least I thought I did, but in the photo I was wearing a striped sweater again, the same red and blue one from the dealership photo. I stared at it for a long time. My arm was around Marcus's shoulder. We were grinning, beers in hand, but there was something wrong with my face. Too wide a smile. Almost posed. Unnatural. Why would I even wear a sweater in the sweaty July weather at a lake anyway? "You okay?" a voice said behind me. I jumped. It was Marcus's mom holding a bowl of potato salad. She smiled warmly. "Bathroom's just there, hun." I nodded. "Yeah, thanks. I don't remember this picture being here." She looked at it. "Oh, you two had so much fun that weekend. You don't remember? We printed that out the same night you all came back. You helped me pick the frame, Jamie." "Oh, yeah. I must still be tired," I said quickly, slipping past her into the bathroom and locking the door behind me. I turned on the sink and stared at myself in the mirror. Same face, same eyes, but I couldn't shake the feeling I was looking at someone else. I washed my face. Suddenly my phone buzzed. Unknown number. The area code was wrong. Too many digits. I answered without thinking. "Jamie?" A panicked voice cut through the speaker, echoing in the small bathroom. "Who is this?" I snapped. "It's me. You. I'm you." What? Is this some kind of joke? "Marcus, if this is you..." "No, please just listen to me. Don't hang up. This is important." "I need your help. I need to get back to my home." "What the hell are you talking about?" I asked. "The Orbis project. It worked. We opened a gateway, a dimensional gate, but something went wrong. We didn't know it would swap us. I don't belong here, and you don't belong there." No, this isn't real. You're lying." "I swear to you, we don't have much time. The longer we stay out of sync, the harder it'll be to return. We'll be lost, Jamie." My head was spinning. How is this even possible? What went wrong? I don't know exactly. There were variables we didn't account for, but I've been working on a fix. I think there's a way back. How do I know you're telling the truth? Have you noticed anything strange? People acting like you said or did things you don't remember? Preferences that don't feel like yours? I hesitated. Yeah, I don't like chicken. I do. I swallowed. This is your world? You're the one who drives the Honda Civic? Yeah, Amy bought it for me. And the sweaters? What's with all the striped sweaters? Sweaters? Your closet's full of them, and you're wearing one in every photo, even at the lake trip last year. He paused, then said, Who the hell wears a sweater in July? My mother used to tell me I was her little miracle, not because I survived anything, just the opposite. Because something never showed up when I did. I was born on July 26th, 1999. Night birth, full moon. The room was dim, but my dad had a camera, an old school camcorder. They still have the footage, and you can clearly see it. Everyone else in the room casts a shadow. I don't. It's not subtle. It's not a trick of the light. My tiny body rests on the bed, but the floor beneath me is untouched. I move, nothing follows. I reach for the nurse's finger. Her shadow stretches long across the tiles. Mine stays gone. My parents tried to explain it. Doctors said it was a fluke. Physics, lighting. But it wasn't, because it never changed. All through childhood, no shadow on sunny days. Not in streetlights, not in flash photos. And then around age 13 it started to change. Not that I had a shadow, but I'd see others. Shadows, where they didn't belong. One time I was sitting on the toilet. Door shut, lights on. I looked down and a shadow moved across the floor, like someone walking past. But no one was there. Another time I was playing in the backyard. The sun was high, I still cast nothing, but I looked to my right, and there was a shadow of me, standing just a few feet away, not moving, not mine. When I told my mom, she went pale. She never told me what she saw in the hospital that night, but she sat me down and said something I've never forgotten. If it's yours, it'll come back eventually, and when it does, don't let it touch you. I thought she was being dramatic, but then last week at 25 years old, it returned. I was brushing my teeth when I saw it, the shadow behind me, attached to me. I laughed at first. It had been so long, I figured it finally caught up. But then I turned off the bathroom light and it didn't go away. It stayed there. In the dark. It shouldn't have been visible, but it was. And it moved when I didn't. I stepped left. It stayed put. I held my breath and it breathed. Chest rising. Falling. Even though it was flat on the floor. It moved like it had lungs. I turned the light back on. Gone. But I could feel it now, following me, watching. At night it stands at the foot of my bed. I don't sleep anymore. Last night I blinked, and it was on the ceiling. Directly above me, stretched long and thin like oil. It whispered, "You were never whole. I've come to fix that." I tried to run. The lights in the hallway all blew out. I got to the front door and my reflection didn't move. I watched myself, frozen in glass, mouth hanging open, eyes wide. Then the reflection smiled, and its shadow twisted like smoke. I've locked myself in the bathroom now. The lights are still on, but the shadow is inside the mirror. It's waiting. It said my name and then, "You don't have a shadow because I took it with me when I left. You were always mine. And now, I want it back.